Good morning. Can everybody hear me? If you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Looks like we still have a couple people that are popping in. That's okay. Move them over to the side. So my name's Shannon Egley. I'm the anatomical coordinator at JUMP, which means that I run this lab behind us. In this lab, we do surgical training with surgeons, whether they're emergency medicine doctors or general surgery or specialists that work on like the brain or your belly region or wherever. So my job is that we do practice surgeries in this lab. We'll set up just like in a surgery room, and we let the doctors practice so that they get really good at what they're doing before they actually work on you if you have to go in for surgery. My other job's a clinical associate of anatomy over at the University of Illinois, which is basically that I teach anatomy to the med students before they become doctors. So it's kind of cool that I get to work with the doctors while they're still students and they're wanting to be a doctor, but then once they become a doctor or a surgeon, then they can come over here at OSF and work with us in the lab here at JUMP too. So I get a lot of time watching these people grow through college and then even into their new job. My background, I'm a biomedical neuroscientist, so I enjoy the brain and the spinal cord. I like studying things, trying to figure out how things work. And that's kind of what we're doing here today, is that we're going to look at different organs that are inside of a body and figure out how each of those organs fit together. And then hopefully we'll see you at a part 2 of this where we're going to talk about how they work. So I'll show you where they are, the different parts of them today. It's called anatomy. And then later we'll do physiology, which is explaining how they work, like how the lungs expand and they contract. And we'll play with things like balloons to measure your lung volume so that we can see how much you blow into a balloon and how much air you store in your lungs. So you should have a kit that looks kind of like this. If you have a bunch of stuff in it, mine's all over the table right now. But I'm going to pull the table back. We're going to walk through it. Make sure everything's there. And I'll show you how to set it up. Restack these. The best thing you can do is clear off your table. My whole bag of things and sitting on another table. Except this thing. So you should have a big trash bag. And with the trash bag, you're not going to open it like a regular garbage can trash bag. You're going to look for a seam. See a little seam along there? The other side doesn't. It has the cut edge, but there's no seam. You see the difference? This is the side we're holding for now. Normally when you open up the bag, you're going to hold the side with no seam and pop it open. But we want the seam because we're going to turn this into a tablecloth. Snap it out. And now you have 5 feet wide, 4 feet deep, a big tablecloth. I'll move my phone. And a mouse. Hopefully you don't have a mouse on the table with you. I wouldn't put anything on top of this black bag that you want to keep. Move it out. And I have a table that has a little edge on it, but it's something that if your parents are standing around, if they want to, if you have some pencils, you can line up pencils on the edge and it makes like a lip so that if something spills on here, it won't come back over onto your lap. My table is actually a drop off on the other side, but it's a lip on this side. Okay. You have a bag of organs, which is like this. They're all different, which is kind of cool. So some of them have, mine has kind of a small bone compared to usual. Some have a huge one. Some have big hearts, small hearts, little tiny kidneys, sometimes big kidneys. We're going to explore that. I'll bring all of my other things back over. We'll go through them one at a time. So I have a placemat. That also reminds me where the camera looks down. I always make sure that I'm working in a space that you can see it. It's also nice because this talks about the different companies that we have. I talked about OSF and JUMP. The university, I teach over there too. And then PNC also helps provide some money so that we can get these things to you at home. The bag is kind of handy other than just carrying things around. If you rip a glove, the bag comes in handy as like a mitten. You have a placemat, or placemat, I'm sorry, cutting pad, just like this. On the top of it, there are 6 sharp pins. If there are 5 or there are 7, that's fine too. Just make sure you always know how many you have. So if you started with 5 instead of 6, make sure you always know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have 6. Because when you pull a pen out, you don't want that sharp tip poking you, so you want to always put it back. Other sharps, I had a pair of scissors right there. I have a pair of scissors. They're rounded tip scissors, kind of like kindergarten scissors. So when you're not using them, you can slide them under the mat, or your parent can open them a little bit and poke them into the mat. That way you know where the sharp edges are at. And the last sharp thing is actually a probe, or looks like a big, thick toothpick. Mine's thinner than yours. Yours is better because it's thicker, so it doesn't break. Mine might break. Hopefully not. But it has a sharp tip. I point that into the top too. You should have a pair of tweezers right here. They're not that sharp, but we'll keep them on top. And then you have your personal protective equipment. So this is really important for making sure that you're safe the whole time. The parts you should have first are the gloves. Put your gloves on. And the chemicals you're working with in here are safe as long as you don't eat them, or have lots and lots and lots and lots of them around. But if that gets on your fingers, it stinks and it'll stay like that smelly stinkiness for days. We do a shark dissection too, and in the shark dissection, one of my gloves ripped one time, and I kept working with it, not knowing, and then for the next several days, I could smell that on my finger. It was pretty gross. So if you go to pick your nose, you would know. And hopefully you're using a Kleenex, but it can actually stink to the Kleenex too. All right, so make sure your gloves are on. Make sure the fingers are tight in the gloves, because we want to use our sensations. The first sense that we're going to use would be touch, of course, feeling things, how gushy it feels or squishy or how firm. Like when we talk about the heart, we're going to feel part of the heart and see how hard it feels, and another part and how gushy it feels, squishy it feels. When you're feeling the lungs, you want to be able to feel that stuff. Like it's almost like really firm slime. So when you're playing with slime maybe that you made at home and it's firm, the lungs feel like to me. So the first personal protective equipment are your fingers and your gloves over them. The next thing, an apron. And if you have a lab coat laying around, that works too, but you need to make sure you fasten your lab coat. So the apron has a neck area up here at the top. You'll open up, you just put it over your head, and then it has 2 long ties that go around the back, and maybe even a full time around so you can fasten it. You want to have the apron on the whole time in case you splash something on you. It doesn't get into your clothes and stain. You can see my lab coat touches some things, and I can't get that out no matter how many times I wash it, it doesn't come out. So we don't want to get any of this on your clothes or your pants or anything. It's kind of like putting a lobster bib on it, red lobster. Personal protective equipment. The last one of the 3 would be the goggles, and I actually have glasses. My glasses are wider than the goggles are, so they're safe to use. If you have glasses that come all the way down and almost touch your cheek, those work just as well as safety goggles. But if you have really thin glasses or some that have to sit further down your nose for whatever reason, you want to make sure you wear the goggles too, because we want to protect anything that could splash up. The goggles are disposable. And now you have your personal protective equipment, your 3 pieces of PPE. So most of the time you're going to be seeing my hands instead of my face. So I'll bring a camera down and we'll switch over. Before, well, I can switch now, but down here on the bottom, if you click something, there should be a chat button. It says that someone can't see anything. I'm glad I moved my chat over. Let's see if I can see you. Can everyone else see me? Yes, if you can see me. Okay, now I know you can see me because I gave you a thumbs up and you matched it. maybe you'll have to restart. So restart, you can log back in, and then let me know if it still doesn't work. For the next couple minutes, we're just going to go through the first page of the book, so you're not going to miss very much that you can't read. Actually can't see them either. It's odd. Do you want to look at the name over here? See if you can help them. All right, I'll bring this camera back down. Like I said, you'll be seeing my hands a lot like I'm a mime, like I'm in an invisible box, except not as fun. Well, funner than being a mime, but let's table just a little bit more. There we go. A little more down. Great. Okay. So the next thing you want is the manual. And manual's home is where the heart is and all the other organs too. So we're going to look at the heart, the lungs, the kidney, a bone, a brain, and an eyeball. Lots of cool stuff. While you're going through this, so I threw a bunch of words together, and our media department made this really cool book. And one of the things I told them is that when I work with doctors, or I teach doctors before they're doctors, I tell them think like a detective, kind of to analyze the situation, gather as much knowledge as they can, and then make their logical explanation or reason based on that. So it's really hard to make a decision if you don't have the knowledge. It's just like doing math. If you don't understand what addition is, if I give you a pile of numbers, you won't know what to do with it. So be a sponge, kind of soak up all the information you can. When you're learning about things, my favorite thing is when I get an actually moment. Every time I say the word actually, I point my finger for some reason. It's like an instinct, like I have a gun on my side and I say actually, and I point my finger. But when you learn something new or something really cool, like when someone talks about the heart and you can add a little piece of information because you learned it, you can say, actually, this is also true. Like, let's say someone says, oh, yeah, we have blue and red blood in our body. You can say, actually, it's all red. It's just that when it doesn't have oxygen, sometimes it's a really dark red, and those blood vessels look kind of blue, but the blood is always red. So there are all these fun little pieces of information. Or if we talk about the lungs and we're talking about breathing, and someone's talking about COVID, you can say, actually, this is how the virus gets into your airway. So be a sponge, soak up all the information you can. It's really fun when you have that knowledge and you can share it. Learn the language of medicine. So it's called medical jargon. Every time that you talk to a professional in their area, they have some kind of jargon, like a lawyer has legal jargon, or a mechanic has, well, jargon that refers to the engine. And I'll show you some of those things, like the terms valve or camshaft. Pay attention to the details. Sometimes it's the little things that are right in front of you you don't always catch. One of my favorite things when I talk about being a detective is that my favorite detective is Sherlock Holmes, and he was actually created by a doctor, Arthur Conan Doyle. And in the story, the very first Sherlock Holmes story, Watson, if you're familiar with Sherlock Holmes, is the detective, and Watson's his assistant, and Watson goes everywhere with Sherlock Holmes and helps solve all of the cases. And Watson said to Sherlock Holmes, I can't believe it. At the end of the solving everything, you tell me how you figured it out, and I see all the same things as you, but I didn't figure it out. And it's the details that Sherlock Holmes pays attention to, the little details that most people don't think about, that people take for granted. So look for the little details, explore, use your fingers and find things that maybe I don't point out. Like if we're looking at the heart and you see some blood vessels, follow it, take your finger and follow it down and see where it goes. Maybe maybe it can generate a new question or something fun or cool for us all to look at. So with that chat box, if you move it over here, doesn't matter. If you have a question, ask a parent if they can type the question out for you, and I'll keep looking over the chat box to see if I can catch it as fast as possible. Right? Be actively engaged. It's hard to play with organs and not be engaged because it's pretty cool. So have fun with it. If you have questions, let me know. After we're done, as long as it's okay with your parents, you can keep exploring into the different organs. Maybe there's something that you saw that you want to play with or look deeper into. Ask them if it's okay to keep doing it. So take a break, go away, wash your hands, and come back and try it again. Evidence. Be a good listener. especially when it comes to doctors and detectives. They want to listen to what people say and how they say it. So it's not always just the words people use. Sometimes it's how they say things. You may be talking to someone and asking them what happened that brings them into the hospital, and they're telling you, but what they're telling you really isn't giving away what's wrong with them. Like, but when you listen to them, maybe they're having a hard time breathing as they talk, and they weren't talking about having breathing problems, but maybe they sound like they just ran a marathon, but they've been sitting on the couch all day. There might be something that's causing that, like there's something in their lungs, or maybe there's something wrong with their heart that it's not pumping blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen, so their breathing is different. But listen to things, listen to how people talk, not just what they say, and be mindful of everything, which kind of covers the details and being a good listener. But pay attention to all the things, even the things that I don't point out. Be a skeptic. And a skeptic means that you doubt things, you wonder about things, and you question a lot of things. And that's probably the coolest thing about being a scientist, and that's what I am as a scientist, is I get to question lots of things and learn about lots of really cool things. So when somebody tells me something, I want to know, is this a fact or is this just something that they're telling me? Like when your friend said, oh man, I was riding my bike the other day and I jumped this sweet ramp and I went 50 feet. That doesn't seem all that realistic. 5 feet doesn't really seem that realistic either. So if maybe this would have bothered you, but if I were a kid, I would have grabbed something like a piece of rope and measured how far they jumped, and then taken that and used a tape measure to mark it off or whatever. But be a skeptic. Wonder, is that really true? Is it a fact, or is it just their opinion? Isolate facts from opinion, which is the next one. So find out what's the real truth and what is just a story that somebody made up. And it's not like they're lying to you on purpose. It's just that event may have been so exciting that they're exaggerating their imagination a little bit. Right? Critical thinking skills. This is really taking all the things you've learned and using your mind to make it make sense. So reasoning skills. Does this thing seem realistic, or can I actually take the facts and my knowledge of what could have happened and figure out exactly what it is? Finding what the problem is, not just fixing things. So sometimes when we get sick or we get a headache, we think it's all in our head, but it might not be. Sometimes when you have a headache, it might be in your lungs because you're not getting enough air. It could be in your heart because it's not pumping enough blood. It could be because something you ate. There could be a lot of different things. But if you just take medicine to fix your headache, it may not have caused or fixed the cause of the problem. So we'll try and figure out the difference between a problem and a symptom. And then take all of your information and do something useful with it. So analyze it, interpret it, evaluate it, make decision based off of all the facts. And that's what it takes to be a good doctor and a good detective. Okay? And then the last thing is just passion. So enjoy what you're doing. If you're passionate about something, it'll always be fun for the rest of your life. I went to college to be a scientist kind of late, but I did it because I knew that's something that I would have fun doing for the rest of my life. And I can't even imagine retiring because I have fun doing what I do. And then the other part of passion is show respect. Remember, if you're going to be a doctor, there are always people that are in front of you, not just a problem. So there are people that are in pain or people that are suffering. It's more about fixing everything about them, not just getting rid of their headache, but making sure that they feel better in the process until they get better. So those are really things that are thinking like a detective. And I did forget one thing. Sorry, Sister Pia has helped me. A pen. I have a pen. So you should also have a pen. I forgot to grab one. One for me. But I kind of cross or put a line through detective and write doctor underneath it because they're both the same thing. And I thought that was the coolest thing about doctors when I was younger, is that they knew so much information about so many different things that they could figure things out so easily. So thinking like a detective is also thinking like a doctor. Uh-oh. Oh no. Yeah. I never give a pen a second chance. If it's acting funny, it goes straight in the trash. Thank you. Okay, so anatomy and physiology. We're doing anatomy, and I kind of talked about it earlier. And doing anatomy is like being in kindergarten again, or maybe kindergarten now, but where you're learning letters. So when I was a kid, I don't remember the detailed steps of it, but I know that I went to preschool or kindergarten and I learned what an A was and what an N is and what a T is and an O. And back then, I'm sure it was terribly miserable learning all these new things. because it took a whole year usually, all the way through preschool, all the way through kindergarten. But it's something that we think is so simple now, but it just took a little bit of learning. Like we learned an A as a straight line up and a straight line down and then one across it. We learned what the letter A is. We gave it a name. Thank you. So we knew what A is. We called it A. We described the A. You may have learned some words that start with A, but you really didn't know all that much about A. Then you went to first grade and you started to read and you took the A's and the B's and the C's, all of these letters, and you learned to rearrange them. So you might have like a C, A, B in that order, which is a cab, and it has a totally different meaning than any of these individual letters. Anatomy is like that, and it's like that for every job that you go into. If you're going to be a mechanic, you don't just know the parts of the car, you have to learn that this thing is a valve, and this thing is a camshaft, and this part's called the header. And those are lots of fancy words, but mechanic, when they want to know what part to work on and they want to talk to another mechanic, they use a specific word. So they don't just say, hey, that metal round thing over there, because you've got a round thing there, one there, one there. You have specific words. That's the anatomy. Physiology is how things work. Today we're just talking anatomy, but I always throw in some physiology because I'm technically a neurophysiologist, which means I love knowing how the brain works. So I would say, here's this piston, and here you have a rod, and there's your camshaft, or probably crankshaft. And when you have an explosion here, it pushes this piston down. The piston moves the rod like that, causing it to spin in a circle. As this explosion relaxes, it pulls the rod back up. So now I go round and around and around. When you hear the popping in the engine, it's all those little tiny explosions. That's cool. So the anatomy is what the pieces are. How things work is awesome. When I was a kid, if I had a broken toy, I figure out it's broken already, I would just take it completely apart, figure out how the different pieces work together. And if I found something that didn't seem to fit in the right place, I'd put the whole thing together with it in the right place and hopefully it would work. That's physiology. There's gross anatomy, which is tricky because you think, ooh, gross, nasty. Gross also means big. So that's one of those anatomy terms. It means the big anatomy. It's the things that you can see with your naked eye, which means that you don't have to have a pair of glasses on to see it, or a magnifying glass, or a special tool to see it. Gross anatomy is when you take something you can hold in your hand, you take it and peel it apart and look inside of it to see what the different parts inside are. If you want to see something you can't see with your naked eye, you use a microscope. Micro means tiny, very tiny. Scope means a tool that helps you see. So a microscope is a tool that helps you see tiny things. When we use fancy words like cyto means cell, ology means to study. So most of our words we use are in Greek or Latin, and you read them backwards. So if this is cyto for cell, ology for study, it means to study cells. Histo means tissue. So what are they doing with histology? They study tissues. So this is how I imagine cells. In your body, you have 100 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells. That's more than all the stars in the entire universe that we're familiar with. So 100 trillion in your body of individual cells. Each one of those cells you could study, but when you take a group of cells that are alike and put them together, it's called a tissue. So that's kind of like me thinking, well, in my house, I have a lot of like family members. I have me and my wife and my kids, and we're all very much alike. We're all individual cells in that house. But when you put us all together and we work as a household to make dinner and to set the table and to clean up after the dinner and everything that happens, we work together. All of our individual cells work together as one thing, and that's a tissue. But let's say, where do we get that food? We need more than our family to get the food. So a lot of tissues, which would be our household, have to work with other households that are farmers or the manufacturers that make the products and things. So all together, everybody that's working to put a food on my plate would be called an organ system or organ. So like your heart, it has muscle cells, individual, has lots of them, so they're tissues. It has blood vessel cells, lots of them. So they're tissues, but those muscles and blood vessels work together to make blood pump, and now they're an organ. So it's a lot of tricky words out there, but hopefully the tough ones I can help you make sense of. So cells are individual things like this guy right here. Tissues are groups of those that are like, so you can see that one's next to that one, which is next to that one, which is next to that one. And this is actually a tube, that yellow thing, that's sliced, and we're looking into it. Get all together to make that tube work properly. Cool. This is the fun part. Whoops, I don't know how that sticker. This is the fun part where we get to open things up and look at everything. So I'm going to skip over this for a second. We already went through here. You should have eye protection, apron, a lab coat, which should be on. A nearby, so that if you have something that splashes, you can take your face and put it under the sink. So especially when the water's, you can actually take your eyes, put them sideways and let the water flow over. If you splash something in your eye, your hand, just use some soap and water, rinse it off. As a parent that's really close to you, so that if something happens, you can go over to the sink. Sharp, safe, disposable. I already mentioned the sharps. They're right there across the top. So you always know where they're at. You have scissors, a probe, and pens. And at the very end, we'll make sure they're all safely packed away, and we'll wrap everything up and throw everything away at one time. And we're working with today, including the pen, will all go in the trash forever and ever. Right here, you should have a dissection manual, which we're looking through right now. We're going to open those up and just, you'll have a bone segment in there, brain, an eyeball, a heart with the lungs attached, and the kidney. Your PPE should be on you right now. Your dissection tray is actually a dissection pad here. And then for disposal, it's all going in the black bag. Tweezers, ruler, and pen. Ruler. You should also have a ruler. I misplaced my ruler too. It's two items, a pen and a ruler I've misplaced today. Hopefully I don't misplace my brain. Oh, wait a minute. There it is, right there. There's my brain. Just kidding. And then a disposal bag, which is the black bag that we set out on the table. So your kit all together looks like that. You haven't opened your organs yet. Please don't yet, because now is the time. All right. Oh, wait, let me use a couple more anatomical terms. So when I'm talking about dissecting something, I'll describe the part that you're using, but I'll also use these terms to describe where you're making cuts, or how far in you're making the cuts, or well, just in general where things are at. So these anatomical directions are just like using the letters north, south, east, and west, right? That's actually an explorer jargon that we use in day-to-day life because it's easy. Instead of just saying go over there, we say, hey, you're gonna have to go 2 blocks to the north, turn right, and then go 3 blocks to the east, and it's this house, right? We use these terms to help things be more easy. That's why we use medical jargon. If I say something's towards the front of an organ, so if I say we're looking at the anterior part of the brain, it means up here. If I say we're looking at the posterior, it's the back part of the brain. The same thing can be used for any part of your body, if we're talking about the anterior of the heart or the posterior of the heart. If I say superior, I don't say above or up. I say superior, saying that your brain is superior or above your heart. Are they touching each other? Nope. I'm just using these words to tell you what direction. Because I could be talking about my knee and my toes. Or let's do this better, straight line, heel. I can say that the knee is superior to the heel, or the heel is inferior to the knee. Oh, yeah. If I say something towards the middle of the body, I say medial, not middle. If I say something towards the left or the right, I'll say lateral to the left or lateral to the right. So lateral means towards the outside edges, like your arms are lateral. Your heart is medial. Proximal means close to the body. Distal means far away. This is usually used for the arms and the legs. So if I hold out my arm and I say that my fingers are very far away compared to my wrist, I say that they are distal. Hard to write on my finger. If I say that my wrist is closer to my body than my fingers, I'll say that the wrist is proximal to the fingers, which is compared to the fingers. And then the last one, superficial and deep. Superficial means close to the surface. Deep means way down inside. Superficial and deep. I have something in the middle of my screen. Let me fix it. All right. And then when I do cuts, there are 3 cuts I'll make. If I say that I need you to do a coronal, or a frontal, I want you to cut the front off of something. And I'll say it again. I'll use the terms, but as we do a cut, so if I say that I want you to cut the heart in a frontal plane, I'll show you. That means I want you to cut it so you can take the front off of the heart. If I say we're going to make a transverse cut, it means we're going across. So if we take this heart and we cut across the heart, I know it doesn't look like the heart you're familiar with. Is that better? I say we make a transverse cut. It means we're cutting across the heart. So we can look down in the bottom and in the top. And the last one is sagittal, which means cut it right down the middle, so that the left side separates from the right side. We can keep going on. There are lots and lots of medical terms. Like when we're talking about the arm, we'll use the term brachial. And we use these in medicine to help people identify things. So if I give you a name like a bicep, you've heard, right? They're called the bicep brachii. Big fancy word saying bicep, which means it has 2 parts to it. Brachii is telling you it's in the arm. So if I have a tricep brachii, R-A-C-H-I-I, still telling you it's in the arm, but what am I looking for? I'm looking for something with 3 parts, right? So on the back of your arm, look at the arm, back here on the back, there's my elbow, are the triceps. On the front are the biceps. And the biceps have 2 parts to it, and the triceps have 3 parts in the back. But we can use those terms. So if I use something like, I was describing something called the rectus abdominis. Rectus means something that's straight up and down. Abdominis tells you where it's at. Where's your abdominal region? It's right here, right? So I would be looking for a muscle that goes straight up and down. It's your rectus abdominis. So these terms are just like north, south, east, and west that tell us how to find things in the body. It's telling us where the location of these muscles are, and then usually the first word describes it. This is a muscle that has 3 parts in the arm. This one has 2 parts in the arm. The only parts that are like that in the arm. Rectus abdominis is telling you it's in the abdominal region. It's the only one that's going straight up and down, right at the center. So when somebody has those ripped, strong 6-pack abs, right? It's because their rectus abdominal muscles are rippling. Okay. This is kind of for funsies later. You can take those words that I just used and build your own in medicine. It's like a Build-A-Bear, but with words. So I can take a word like hemato. It's in the list somewhere. I know I saw it the other day. Oh, there it is right there. Hemato means blood. Hema also means blood. And that's telling me what I'm looking at, right? We throw a vowel in there. We call it a combining vowel. And then we put the suffix, which is the end of the word, that's telling us what we're doing with it. So ology is the study of, right? This is saying blood. So hematology is when you study blood. If you call it a hematologist, it's a person that studies blood. We can go long, long words, really long ones. We could throw probably 4 or 5 of these O's in here. But let's not. Let's give you another example. Electro, what's that mean? Even without looking, you probably figured it out, right? Electric, how about cardiac? You ever heard of somebody doing cardio exercises? What are they doing? They're like exercising hard, so their heart is pumping really hard. So cardio refers to the heart. Gram means a record. If they say a graph, it means a picture of. So we could actually figure out what they're doing here. If it's a gram, it would be they're recording the heart's electricity. That's what they're doing. If they took a picture of it, and you've probably seen these pictures, you see the little monitor with the buttons across the bottom, and then you'll see that little green line that goes bloop, beep, bloop, bloop. that, and they took a snapshot of it so it looked just like this would be an electrocardiograph because it's a picture of that. And the doctor will usually have it on a piece of paper that they can print out, and those, well, here's when the top of your heart would beat, and this is where the bottom of your heart beats, and here's where it relaxes. So during these flat times, your heart's actually not doing anything at all electrically. It's relaxing. Relaxation, relaxation, relaxation. Right? So they can describe that to you because they took an electrocardiograph and looked at your electricity in your heart, and they can describe it to you. So there are all kinds of fun things you can do. You can keep this handy so that the next time you hear a medical term, like someone's talking about, I went in to see the dermatologist yesterday. You can look up the word derma right there. Derma, plug it in, derma. And it's an ologist, so it's a person that studies skin, right? We mentioned cyto earlier, meaning cells, but you can put these different pieces together to figure it out. The first time that someone told me about a disease, it was a brain disease, and I had never heard of it before. It was a really long word. I just broke it down out loud, and I said, bump, 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 bump. And I basically just plugged all these in. They said, yeah, that's the disease. I had no idea what it was, but I used the different pieces of the word, and I said each of the pieces out loud, and they said, yeah, that's it. So it's kind of fun when you can learn about these things and actually be able to use the word. Let's start learning about the things. So now is where you have to open up your organ. Before you open them, I'm going to show you how to open it so you don't spill anywhere. And you always want to make sure the only place that you're working on the organs is on top of this black bag in your special space so that you don't spill or contaminate anything. So I'm going to pull this up and out of the way. I'm going to flip back over so that you can see. Okay, back. So first thing you do when you hold the organs, you're always gonna make sure that the bottom's down, the open side's up, so you don't spill, because you don't want this on anything but your area. So here's a fun fact for you. The chemical that's in here is called formalin. We used to call it formaldehyde, a different kind of formalin. It was more toxic. But I always thought, man, you know, why don't I ever hear about this formaldehyde anywhere else? Why is it only in this stuff? And I looked it up, and I was surprised because formaldehyde, same thing that preserves organs in formalin now, but it's everywhere around you. And I thought, this makes all kinds of sense, because here's why. If I go outside and I'm going through the woods and my feet are stomping in all of the like fungus and molds and bacteria and grossness, and I go home and I take my shoes off and I put it on a rug, the rug gets dirty, but all that fungus and mold that normally grows everywhere, I mean, it grows on your bread, your cheese, everything, why is it not growing on this rug? Well, I found out that they put formalin in the rug, the carpet. So all the carpet fibers in your house actually have formaldehyde inside of them to keep them from molding. Your table, when they finish it, the protective covering has formaldehyde in it so that it doesn't rot. Your shoes, your clothes, the paint that you put on the wall. I just painted my door the other day, and I was thinking about it. I looked up, sure enough, the paint on your walls, the paint on your door all has formaldehyde, so mold doesn't grow easily on it. Right? So you don't want to eat this stuff, but it's all over around you. There's a rubber band on here, and everybody has goggles on, right? So I pull it off, rubber band goes shooting. There are two bags. You're going to want to spin the inner bag so that pocket of juice on the bottom, not the kind of juice you're going to put in a sippy cup for sure. But I want to make sure that the juice side's down, and you can see on the top it's sealed. I want to make sure that's up. It's double bagged, so if you spill a little bit, you're okay. Now you're going to grab your scissors, pull the bag down just a little bit, and I like to cut just under the seal so that I have plenty of bag. If you cut really low, then your chance of spilling are a lot higher. Cut most of it, just tuck it back down. Right. And there are two things you can do with this. You can either dump the juice out, but if you do, you carry it like this over the garbage can or wherever you're going to dump it into. Make sure it's a leak-proof garbage bag. Then you dump it out so that way you're not going to spill. There's a leak-proof sack in it. If you're outside doing this, if there's somewhere that you're dumping it, you can rinse it. Put my powder bag down. I'm just showing you for an example. Make sure my organs don't fall out. I dump the extra juice off, but I'm leaving it in the bag and bringing it back to my table, and now I can sit it down without having to worry about it leaking. That's what you want to do. And as we need each organ, we'll reach in and grab it. So I'll let you in a minute or two, opening your bag, dumping off the extra juice, and then bringing your bag back and putting it on the table so you can work with it. And I will flip the camera back, and I'll watch. Since I can see you, if you want to turn your camera on, but you don't want me to see behind you or you see you, just tilt the camera down somehow so I can see your project. That way, when everything's ready and you're ready, you can just give me a thumbs up because I'll ask you, are you ready? And then you can do like I've been doing with my hands underneath the camera. Just give me a thumbs up. Most people are back. Cool. Everybody good? Everybody ready? Okay. Put my camera down. All right. So you have the same book as I go through it. If you can't read because it's blurry on the screen or whatever, you have the same book that I have. So the first organ you're going to get is going to be the lungs that go with the respiratory system. Slide this down a little bit. And they're the big, gray, squishy ones. They look like this. Oop. Perfect. So it's kind of funny. When I was talking about details, my boss, actually the very first time that we did this with the organs, she took a stack of these home and we did the Zoom meeting and they pulled it out early, which they weren't supposed to do, but she said, hey, there's no heart in this bag. What about the heart? It's like my favorite part I want to see. And I said, send me a picture of what you have. So she sent me a picture and I sent a picture back with this thing circled. I said, there's your heart. I said the heart and the lungs are all attached. So when you get it, it doesn't look like the heart that you traditionally would think. She goes, oh, well, I'm glad I'm doing this with my daughter. So they got a chance to work on it together, but it's the little details. When you look at the different pieces and understand how they work together, not everything is always exactly the way you expect it to be. But by the end of this, hopefully, you'll know what you're looking for. So the respiratory system is actually more important than just breathing. So we do breathe, bringing air in, moving it along. Oops, popped up my window. There we go. Breathing air in, moving it along, getting it down to our lungs, taking the oxygen out, and putting carbon dioxide out. That's important. But really, think about this. When you breathe, your whole chest expands, right? Well, it doesn't just expand out, it also pushes in. So your two lungs are actually smashing blood vessels that go up into your heart. So when you breathe, you're also pumping blood with your lungs indirectly, which means that the lungs don't directly squeeze blood inside of them, but what they do is they expand, and it's just like if I had a balloon here and I started pushing, you know, the balloon would shrink down. The blood vessels are there, and when the lungs expand, they go, they smash the blood vessels to pump blood, right? So breathing is more than just bringing air in. Breathing is also helping get circulation for blood around. Gas exchange means that when you bring air in, then particles of oxygen, gases, have to go in your blood, and carbon dioxide goes back out. And I'll show you a picture of that too. So gas exchange means you're trading gases, getting rid of the bad stuff, getting in the good stuff. When we do shark dissections, we actually talk a lot about how sharks do this because they live too. So how do they get oxygen in if they're in water all the time and they don't come up for air? And they'll explain that, how gills work. Sound production, this is kind of crazy, but I know you've had this happen. When you're really sick and your nose is stuffy, this whole area up in here is responsible for giving you the sound to your voice that you're familiar with. But when you can't move all the air and the noise back out, then it sounds muffled. It sounds funny when you're talking. So you sound totally different. People expect a certain voice from you or the way that you use certain words. So it's important to have this respiratory system intact all the time. Olfactory is a fancy word for smell. And you have a pen, you can write down all you want. When you're done, maybe your parent can take a picture of the pages that you wrote on so you can remember what they are. If you want another copy of the booklet, just email me and I'll send you a digital copy. But olfactory means smell. Right here at the top of your nose, whoop, and really about that big, you have an area that's about the size of a postage stamp. So the next time you get a postcard in the mail or an envelope, if you look at that size of that stamp, that's about how big your smell area is in your nose. Not super big, but you have about 10,000 different smells you can smell in that little tiny area. And this is pretty gross. So let's say that you're walking on the street, and I can't do a poo emoji very well, but let's say that here's your poo, right? Whoop. And of course, poo emoji has a smiley face. But you're walking along and you step in your poo emoji. Well, if you can smell it, little pieces of the poo emoji went floating through the air, went up into your nose, and stuck on that area. So you have to have a special little switch that's sensitive to parts of that poo that tells your brain, whoop, hey, that's poo. It's terrible. Take your foot out of it, right? So here's what's really gross. That particle is in your nose. So that poo is in your nose. Later, when it comes unconnected, or disconnects here, it'll go into the mucus that's in your nose and it'll go back and you'll actually swallow that poo. Ugh, gross. So my daughter thinks one of her actually fun facts are that when people smell something that's stinky and they say, oh, that's stinky, she goes, you know what? That means it's in your nose and you're gonna swallow it later. And it's kind of true, gross. So you ever have that friend that says, ooh, this really stinks, smell it. Why do I need to? You just told me it stinks. I don't trust you. I don't want that in my nose. So olfactory, particles of whatever you're smelling go into your nose. They turn on little switches in that little area and it tells your brain what you're smelling. And then protection, and this is really important. So like viruses or bacteria or mold that's in the air, if you took one 3-foot by 3-foot by 3-foot cube of air outside and you counted all the pieces of fungus, whoops, at the end, you have over 1 million little pieces of fungus floating in that square of air that you're breathing in. So your airway is important for protection because this fungus, it doesn't have a steering wheel on it when it flies through the air. It just floats through the air wherever the wind's blowing it. So when it blows in, your first form of protection actually, and you may deny it, but you had nose hairs. You know, like when grandpa gets really close and you look in his nose and you see all those hairs, you have those too. It's just more visible in grandpa's nose. But those hairs act like a net and they try and catch some of those. So then you can blow it into a Kleenex later. If it gets past, remember there's no steering wheel, the air flows like this, right? Like that. Air is super, super light, so it can go in that pathway. But mold, bacteria, viruses like COVID is a virus. They're a little bigger. So the COVID virus is like a, well, if you have an air particle that's that big, oxygen, COVID is way, way bigger. So when it gets pulled in, it's heavy, right? It's like a go-kart driving around. It's hard to steer those things. So it goes whoa, 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 and shoots off that path. Or if it's lucky, it goes around this way and then boom, it's back here. It's hard to get it down, but when you're breathing lots of air in around people that have lots of COVID around them, the chances are of it getting way back here and down in your lungs is better. So here's some of your protection. When you breathe in at the back of your nose, very, very back, way back here, you've got a little area that's called a tonsil. When that virus or bacteria or mold, if it sticks here, your immune system are like little warriors that fight off and kill that bacteria or that mold or that virus. If you eat food, because you sometimes breathe through your mouth, right? If you eat food, it's covered in bacteria. You know, you think it's cooked and perfect and everything, wrong. There's still bacteria on there. So when you're chewing and chomping it, as the food moves back here, here's a tonsil. Down here at the back of your tongue is another tonsil. So if you look straight on, you actually have a whole ring around the back of your airway / mouth full of tonsils to try and fight off or protect you from bacteria and viruses. So this is why we wear masks. It reduces the number of these things floating in the air. And we don't wear masks just because somebody around us is sick. We wear masks so that we don't get other people sick too, because if this is inside of you and you breathe out, that gets caught in the mask and doesn't float into the air. So we're just trying to keep as many of these little particles out of the air as possible. All right? The upper respiratory system, moving along, is all this that's in your head, it's in your throat, all the way down to right about here. This picture ends. It's called upper airway. Where this ends is an area called the vocal cords. You might get vocal cords on your sample that's back here, but maybe not. It depends on where the butcher cut it at. So way down here, going into the vocal cords, there's a little flap called the epiglottis. In this picture, you can see from the top down, it's actually flat and wide. Here it's just a side view. So it would be like you holding this picture like this and looking at the side. So it's thin, right? But it's also flat, like that. Every time that you eat food, we talk about food coming down here, whoop, this epiglottis folds down so that the food goes right by and into a different tube that goes into your stomach. It's called the esophagus. So the upper airway ends just after this epiglottis in this special box that we call the voice box. Sorry, I'm writing on squishy stuff, so my handwriting is terrible. But the voice box, we call it that because it has the vocal cords, which are these things in it. So if you ever get a chance to come here to jump and do the stem, I actually have unpreserved lungs that we experiment with, and you can look at the vocal cords and we can touch them and move them. But when you're talking, those little cords vibrate like strings real quick and give sound. So like if you're looking at strings on a guitar or strings inside of a piano, they vibrate just the same way. That's the end of the upper airway. So this part, mainly the protection, getting rid of the stuff that you breathe in, helping with the tonsils and things like that. Right? Lower respiratory tract is where we pick up with this. So the lower respiratory tract is this tube right here called the trachea. See it? Don't feel it in your neck because you've touched grossness, but later, if you feel the front of your neck, you can feel that tube that you can kind of wiggle back and forth. That's the trachea. So yeah, mine doesn't have vocal cords in it. If they would cut it just a little bit higher, it would have had the vocal cords, and we could have watched the cords move, made them move. Right. So in the trachea, you can see it's a long tube all the way down. We think of it just being in our throat, but it's not. It goes down our throat, it goes into our chest, and it actually stops way down here below our sternum, which is the bone in the front of your chest. Some people call it the breastbone. It's called the sternum. So if you tapped your chest, right there where the bone's at, that's your sternum. This little tip where it splits, we call the carina. So we're going to take a cut. We need scissors. And probably already has the beginning of a cut in there. But you're going to feel it. Feel that hard side feel the squishier side. They're both pretty firm, but this one, if I squeeze it and I let go, it bounces back up. So it stays hollow. This side, if I squeeze it, it stays flat. It's because your trachea, your air pipe, windpipe, has these rings in it that you're going to cut and look at. You can kind of see them. Those rings. So let's cut. You're going to cut the flat side. You hear it kind of snip, snip, snip like you're cutting Christmas wrapping paper. In fact, this side, if you get it in the right place, you don't even have to cut. You just pull the scissors like I just did. They do all the cutting. We're going to keep cutting. See how I didn't even have to snip, slide right through. We're going to keep sliding until it looks like we can't slide anymore. Still going. Boom. Yeah. I open it up. You see the rings, the little lines going back and forth? You have about 16 to 20 in your throat. Well, wow, I can't even count many down here. I mean, it could, but it's going to take a while. You see each of those rings, they're shaped like the letter C. They're not complete rings. When you think of a ring on your finger, they're more like the toy rings you get, like at somebody's birthday party when they hand out the little rings, or at Halloween when you have the spider ring, because those rings will come around kind of like the letter C, but they don't connect at the end, so they fit everybody's finger. If that were the little spider, terrible drawing spider. But these rings are like that. There's a little tiny muscle right here at the back, and that's what you just cut. And that little muscle makes it so that when you swallow food back here, this little muscle will stretch. So if you take a big bite of pizza and you swallow it, that pizza is big. It's going to push over towards your airway a little bit, but still slide down to the stomach. The med students are always like, oh, anatomy is so hard. There's so many words. But this word for this muscle, it's the only muscle in the trachea, so we just call it the trachealis. So a lot of times when you learn one or two words, you can find 5, 6, 10, or even more that use that same similar word. So we're going to follow the trachea all the way down where you opened it. If you want, hey, this is a good time to experiment. You can cut the other side a little bit. Feel the snap, 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 because we just cut through the rings, and you can see the rings. There's one there, one there, one there. You don't see that on the other side. This was all muscle. This has those rings. You see what I'm talking about? Right. I'll snip in between. A little snip in between. So I can actually separate the ring. See, they're almost like a rib cage. See them? Here's one, and here's one. The cartilage. Cartilage is in your nose. You can wiggle the front of your nose. It's in your ear, so you can tug on your ear to let go and it snaps back. Cartilage and bone are almost identical under a microscope, except bone is harder because it stores what mineral? What mineral you drink in milk to make your bones strong? Calcium. Get a little more snip in there. All right, and here, if you've cut far enough down, you see how the splits? Part of it, I have my closed scissors, part of it keeps going down this way, but another part of it branches off that way. So if you have a probe, I grabbed a probe just like yours because yours are better than this one that I had. But we can take the probe and stick it in one pathway, see it down there. And we can take the scissors, put another pathway. So you can see the two paths, 1, 2, they come off the trachea. So now it's not called trachea anymore. Now they're called bronchi. So this thing here that's kind of like light gray, and this thing over here that's like a light gray, those are both called bronchi. So remember those medical words? There was one that ended in itis, itis, so a suffix. If I put the word bronchi and an itis after it, I would have a disease or disorder, not a disease. It would be try that again. O-N-C-H, and then I put the I-T-I-S on the end. Itis means swelling. Bronch is telling you the structure. So if I read it backwards, it's a swelling of the bronchi. Bronchitis is when your bronchi swell or inflamed, which means that they're swollen up, and they make too much mucus and it's hard to breathe. Right, so those are bronchi. You actually have 23 splits. So here's one split, what we call primary bronchi. Here's another that we call secondary bronchi. Here's an example. Here would be a tertiary or a third. Here's a quaternary or a fourth. And they just throw those fancy beginnings on to let you know what number it is. Primary is 1, secondary is 2, tertiary is 3, quaternary is 4, and they keep branching. This picture can't show you, but there are 23 splits of the bronchi until they get so small that you can't see them with the eye anymore, your eyes, and then they're called bronchioles, and they're so teeny tiny you have to have a microscope to see these. And so what this is a cartoon picture of a microscope image. So the air comes all the way down here and it gets into these little tiny round balls, kind of like bouncy balls. They remind me of grapes. When I was a kid, my grandma had fake fruit on her table and I thought it was a real grape and I bit into it and it looked like this on the inside. It was hollow on the inside with the fake fruit on the outside. These little things are called alveoli. Alveoli are the important little tiny microscopic sacs, like grapes, but hollow, that catch air, pull the oxygen out. So here's the sac. You can see air goes into it. It pulls the oxygen into your blood. You see this blood coming in, going along, and dumps out CO2, and that's what they call it gas exchange. It's trading or exchanging. Brings in oxygen, pushes out CO2, which is a waste gas. So when I say in and out, I mean into the blood, out into the lungs. And you can see, here's your blood passageway. Forms a little net of blood around each alveoli so that oxygen can go in and get carried off to the heart. So where we see blue, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, your blood isn't actually blue here. Your blood has no, or very little, oxygen, which you write O2. People say it's blue because a lot of these blood vessels that carry the blood that doesn't have oxygen in it look blue from the outside, but the blood itself is always red. It's just dark red. Where, like kind of like this down here, where with oxygen, O2 is a bright red. Kind of like this over here. So I pick up oxygen, put it in my blood, turns it bright red, and it carries it off to the heart. We're going to look at after this. That's how you get air in. So you are welcome to explore on. I'm going to put this in here, poke it over, and I can feel the tip of my scissors right there. So I can actually follow the pathway. You can do that too. The lungs, you have a right and a left lung. When we're talking about right and left, right is always the patient's side, right? Left is always the patient's side, left. So even though I'm looking at this picture and this is my right hand, oops, I just did that backwards. I was thinking wrong. Oh, doing a mistake. Like that. That's an important thing to remember. So this is my right, the patient's left. So if I put myself in their perspective, there's the right hand, there's the left hand. So when I talk about things like the lungs, and I talk about the right lung, this side's right. Patients, this side's left, the patients. If I look at the two, look at that. This one has a big chunk missing out of it. We actually call this the cardiac notch. And do you remember what the word cardio or cardiac means? It means heart. So it's the heart notch. This is where your heart sits, and we'll look at that. It's right inside there. So it takes up a little bit of space over on the left side. If you look here, see this real light line? There's a line here, a real light line right there, a real light line right here. Those are dividers. Each part of your lung is called the lobe. So let's look at that on here. Right, I poke the scissors in. I can feel this right there. I can see this lung. If I peel pieces back, there are lobes. That one got cut just a little bit. So here's a lobe up here. Here's a lobe right here. There's a big lobe down here. If you look kind of closely, not like stick your face into it, but if you squint down, you can see that there's a layer on top of the lungs that looks like a clear kitchen wrap that goes all over. Oh, here's a really good example right here. See that bubble? That bubble is in between the actual lungs and that layer that I just talked about. I can kind of move it, the bubble along. It shouldn't be there. It's called a bleb, which is a technical term, even though it sounds like a fun term. Because if this tissue gets cut, you can see the inside is rough. The outside is smooth, rough. So here you can see the smoothness, and then it just turns rough. You can cut some of this. So we got 1, 2, 3 lobes over here. I'm going to cut a piece of the lobe off. Like I said, it's kind of like cutting. You make slime at home and cutting it. Feels kind of like that. But when I squeeze it, it's gushy. I can see little holes in there. Since I can see these holes, they're always one of two things. They're either a big blood vessel or a big bronchi. I can't see these tiny blood vessels, and I can't see the little bronchioles or the alveoli. They're just assumed all through here. It's like if I had a million of these little grapes, microscopic ones, I can't see 1 or 2 or 3, but when I put a million of them together, it looks like this. So air would go down, go all the way down to the alveoli, and then when I was ready to blow out, whoosh, back out. Right now it's full of fluid instead of air, but you get the point. I love the way this feels. When we're here able to do STEM labs in the lab, I use fresh lungs and we inflate them and watch them blow up. You can't inflate these. Please don't try, because if you push a bunch of air in here, it could rip, but it could also blow all of those chemicals back out and splash all over the place. So right, so 3 lobes over here. Over on this side, there's 1 lobe, 2 lobes, 3 lobes. So 3 lobes on this side. I flip it over in the middle. There's technically 1 extra lobe in the middle. It's called an accessory lobe. We don't have this. But if you notice, sheep has 3 here, 3 here, 1 in the middle. That's 3 plus 3 is 6, 7. You have 1, 2, 3 on the right, 1, 2 on the left. You have 5. That's it. So sheep has a little more space in their chest to have extra lobes. We don't. In fact, we lose one of the lobes that we should have had because of the heart sitting in there. Right, that's where we are with the lungs. So we're not going to go a lot more into it, but you're welcome to explore. You can actually cut down here later if you want to save it with your parents. You could, if you wanted to, you could cut along here and actually cut the one lung off and sit at this side. But that's for later, because we're going to go on to the heart. Super exciting. I'm a brain guy, but the heart's probably my second favorite organ in the body. Cardiovascular. Cardio means heart, vascular means blood vessels. There are actually 3 parts to it. There's the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood is the 3rd part of it. So if you look at all the blood vessels in your body, all those little microscopic ones like we saw here, all the big ones that you can see with your eye, you have about 62,000 miles of blood vessels. Inside your body, you have about 5 to 5.5. Well, an adult has about 5 to 5.5 liters of blood inside their body. So imagine that when you get a little drop of blood, how much you have in there. And I always like to imagine with things that I see every day. So when I think of 5 liters, I imagine like 2-liter bottles of soda. Not the best at drawing soda bottles or anything for that matter. But imagine that. I'm going to put a PC on it for Pepsi Coke. So there's 2 liters, right? Wow, it just keeps getting worse. There's 4 liters, and then half of that. So 2 full 2-liter bottles, and then a half of a third one. That's 5 liters. That's about how much blood an adult has in their body. Every minute, you send all that blood through the body. So your heart will beat about 70 times in 1 minute. And each time it pumps a little squirt of blood, but over that whole minute, it will pump all of this one full time. That's pretty crazy. When we look at the blood vessels, I said the ones that are red, we always imagine having oxygen. The ones that are blue, we always imagine having no oxygen. But that's not always perfect. In fact, there's one blood vessel in your body that has lots and lots of oxygen, but every book, every coloring book, textbook, whatever, school book, shows it as blue every time. And well, I should look at that blood vessel. So here's the path. Let's say I just picked up some oxygen in the lungs. I have to bring it into the right side of my heart. Remember, patient's right, which looks blue. Oops, I just drew that backwards. From the body, sorry. Coming down here, going into the heart, so it's blue. Now I have to get it into the lungs, so the lungs are going to push that out. And it's not working so well. It goes into the lungs, picks up oxygen, comes back in as red blood into the left side of the heart. So you can see in this picture too. The body pushes blood into the heart on the right side, no oxygen. The heart squeezes it out and goes to the lungs, here, picks up oxygen, brings it back into the left side as red blood, and then it has to push it hard enough you can push it to every one of these red blood vessels all over the place. So the left side of your heart actually pushes so hard it can squirt blood up into the top of your head, to the tips of your fingers, to the tips of your toes, all fresh blood. So let's look at the heart and see if we can figure this out. I'm going to flip this over so I can see that medial lobe, the accessory lobe. Pull my heart down. You're going to have to stretch it just a little bit. The chemicals actually make it kind of firm. So it's almost like you have to massage it. This is the heart. Isn't it pretty cool? Does it look just like you imagine it will look? Probably not at all. Feels pretty firm. If you take this yellow thing and you pull on it, pops right off. You take another yellow thing, pull on it, pops right off. Oh my gosh, another one. All these. We could be peeling all day long yellow stuff all through here. This yellow stuff, fat. Look at all the fat that's over the heart. This is a sheep. They don't eat candy. They don't eat ice cream. They don't eat all kinds of junk food. They eat grass and grains all day, right? They have a really healthy lifestyle, and they still have fat all over the heart. Because fat's a good protector. It's a good insulator. And it takes care of your heart on the outside. Right? We're going to cut through that. So see where I pulled a couple of these pieces of fat off? See how there's like a sac underneath? We call that the pericardial sac. Peri means perimeter or something around, like a fence is the perimeter of your yard, right? Cardio means heart. So it's saying that there's something wrapping around the edge of the outside of the heart. It's called the pericardial sac. I'm going to grab a little wrinkle of that sac. See how it wrinkles up like that? I'm going to snip it. I'm going to grab a little wrinkle. And you can position this however you want. You could peel off a little piece of fat back here. We could do it, in fact, there. Completely laying down. You see a little ripple. Boop. Fat's really slimy. And I cut it. I cut a little cut. You don't have to cut big cuts. Now I can slide my scissors right inside that hole. If I slide one open edge of the scissors in the hole and I cut it again, gloves are getting a little slimy. Put my finger inside that hole. That. Put it way in here. I'll use my pinky so I can keep my hand open. There you go. But I can put my pinky way in there and go around. You can feel all the way around the heart. Feel it? I can see that sac. Now I'm going to take the scissors. I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to cut down the sac. Nice. Like that. I'm going to cut a little bit more until I have to stop. I can feel I can't go any further that way. Now I'm going to go the other way. Peeling it up, cutting the sac. Peeling it up. Probably use my fingers. In fact, I will use my fingers. I'm holding it up. Keep your fingers away from the blade. Cut, cut, and I'm actually cutting all the way around. Cut in the back. Really open it up like this. What I'm doing is something called a clamshell. Guess why they call it a clamshell? Because if you look at the way it's cut, this, it opens like a clam. Whoop. Just like a clam opening up. And now, all this is clotted blood. There's some up here. I'm just going to wipe it off. Put all in that sac. So I've opened the whole sac. I peeled it back, kind of like a flower. Right? The flower, here are the leaves going all around. I'll give you just a minute for you to open it up. I see some people are still working on it. Over. Okay. So yeah, one person is still peeling a little bit. Okay. Right. So it's up to you. If you want to cut this whole thing off, you can. I like leaving it attached because I don't like extra pieces all over the table. I'll just use an example. Gloves out of my reach. So I ripped a glove and I just took it off. I'm just going to put it inside the bag. Like this for a minute. Oops. Like a mitten and grab a hold of it. When you flip this over, that, wiping off stuff off the surface. See my heart? I'm going to pair the two sides. Yeah, that's where I want it. So, peel back just a little bit. If I flip in the book, look at the picture of the heart on the next page, 17. There we go. When I hold the heart in my hand, you see how it kind of goes in the same direction? Here, like this. There's this one. See how the tip right here, we call it the apex or the point, kind of points down to the patient's left, which would be your right. Up here on the top, we're going to have some little things that poke off, called auricles. They're yellow in the picture just to make them stand out, but they're actually not yellow here. See it? Normally when they're alive, they're like a dark red. There's one. Go to the other side. There's two. The second one. So we've got the 1, 2 right there. So now I know I'm holding out of the front of the heart. The little tiny lines all over the place. So you have fat on the heart too, and later you could take and peel that fat off. You need a tool, probably. I mean, I could peel it off like this. You might want a tool. See how gross and slimy it is? It's better just to leave it alone for now. Underneath all of that fat are little tiny blood vessels, and you kind of see the cracks or lines where some of them go. So these blood vessels are like a river. Fresh blood comes out of the heart on the top, way up here. Some of that fresh blood trickles down the river all the way downstream like this, down these blood vessels that we call the coronary arteries. You see fresh blood comes out, trickles down, trickles down. We have the left one coming over this way. We have the right one going that way. Patient's directions, remember? So this is why these are so important. If somebody has a heart attack, it's because of these little teeny tiny blood vessels. It's not because of all the blood vessels in their body and the big ones and the ones you can see. It's because the little teeny tiny ones are really hard to see with your eye. How I think about it. I got a box of gloves. I got a box of gloves, please. Yeah, medium. Thank you. So I imagine this being like a beaver. And beavers build dams, right? So beavers build dams because they want the water to go in a different direction, or they want the water to stop altogether. We don't want blood to stop or go in a different direction. We want it to keep going down, because this muscle down here, your heart muscle, needs blood. Just like water in a river flowing downstream carries nutrients. I know we think of the Illinois River and we think it's dirty, but it's actually packed with nutrients. And these plants need it so they can grow up big and they can flower, right, and have other nutrients or other flowers. But if the beaver builds a dam, let's say right here, that water coming down is going to trickle down to almost nothing. You ever bought your mom or dad a flower and they cut it, you take it home and you put it in a vase with no water, and the next day it's droopy, right? If you put water in it fast enough, sometimes it'll perk back up and you have a flower again. If this water is trickling, this blood is trickling down to these muscle cells, what's going to happen to the muscles? They get weak, right? They don't squeeze blood as easy as they did. So what they'll do is they'll tell the brain, they'll send a signal to the brain saying, ouch, 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 you know, something's wrong, fix it, fix it, fix it. Problem with the brain is it doesn't know what heart pain is, because our hearts don't usually hurt. So when that signal is the brain goes, oh, whoa, where's that coming from? And so it makes these people feel like the brain's going, well, maybe it's here in their neck. Well, maybe it's down here in their left arm. Maybe it's across their back. Maybe it's on their chest. So as the heart's crying to the brain, the heart thinks that the pain could be in any of these places. It's not, though. It's the heart saying, I need more blood. So if somebody knows what that is, then they can take an aspirin, and an aspirin might help break apart the beaver dam, right? The clot that's causing a problem. But what they should definitely do is call 911. When the ambulance gets there, they'll give them a medicine that will help break this away so that blood will flow back down. And that'll make them feel better, and it'll help protect their heart. Because what will happen to this flower if you don't get the problem fixed? So there's no water here, right? If you just leave it like that for a few days, right, it dies. Petals fall to the ground, and there's no bringing it back. If something happens to someone's heart and they don't get it fixed right away, this part of their heart could die, and they can't fix it. They may live through it, but this part of their heart will never be the same. So those are really, really important blood vessels, and that's what we're looking at right here across the surface, these little lines are coming down. Next thing we're going to look at are the big blood vessels in the top. See them? So it's almost like roots of a mushroom if you have it upside down. So I'm just pushing everything back as far as I can, take my fingers, and I can slide in here. Feel that? It helps me pull things back. So a lot of people think that a surgeon's favorite tool is a scalpel because they get to cut lots of stuff, but in reality, they don't. A scalpel is usually there to cut the first time, and then they use their fingers or other tools to work their way through, not to cut. So if you want, see a big blood vessel here, you can stick your finger under it, wiggle it in there, feel the grossness, right? Keep wiggling, keep wiggling, keep wiggling, just keep pushing and wiggling. Whoop, there it is on the other side. So now that I have a pathway through there, back and forth and back and forth, I know that's one blood vessel. Let's see if we can find another one. Yep, sure enough. So if I pull it this way, see there's another one right there behind it. I can do the same thing, wiggle my finger in there. And just keep wiggling. And that one's through. See my finger wiggle? There are 4 of them all together. It's like an Easter egg hunt, right? I'm gonna go this way this time. Oh yeah, there's one. I know they're vessels because they're connected right to the top of the heart. The only thing connecting to the top of the heart is that clear sheet that has fat on that we looked at earlier, and these vessels. So I'm gonna go this way now. I have this one. There's one back there, remember? I go this way. Oh, that one was easy. There's 3 of them. I'm running out of fingers. 1, 2, 3. And the last one, right behind this one, but straight back. So I have one here, I have one here, I have one here, and the last one I can't see. So let's go ahead and cut those. When I cut them, I'm going to cut as high as I can away from the heart. So this is the superior part of the heart. I'm going to cut as superior as I possibly can. To be safe, I'm going to take my scissors and open them up, and I'll follow my finger. There's my finger. I'm going to follow it through. And I'm taking my finger all the way out. I'm putting the scissors as far as I can in. You can kind of see the tip of the scissors right there. Can you see it? Right there, that little guy. And now I'm going to snip. Snip, snip. I have no fingers in there. Snip, 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 snip. Cool. Like that. So there's what it looks like on the inside. This stuff. This inside of it. It's all blood. Dried blood. Well, not dried, preserved blood. So everything in here, while you're still alive, it's more pink looking in color or even pale looking in color. The fat's not this weird yellowy color, it's a different kind of yellow. These are all red. Wipe that off. And even though you see 2 holes there, this is actually only 1 blood vessel coming up and out. Because if I look at the top of the heart and I do this, see, it's actually only 1. It just splits right there, and we cut it at the split. I just like to cut a little bit high so I can look at this later. All right, what other vessels do we have? So we had our finger under this one. We had our finger under this one, right? Second one. Have my finger through it one time. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just going to follow my finger, go as high as I can. Ooh, this one can go pretty high. Help it out a little bit. So I'm pulling. As I pull, the wrappers around the vessels move. Every organ in your body has a wrapper around it. We just saw it. Here's the heart's wrapper. Blood vessels have their own wrappers. Your brain has a wrapper. We'll see it in just a little bit. So underneath, going as high as I can, way up there. That's pretty high. And snip. Got it. See, that was 1 vessel. So there are 2 of them that we've cut. We found one over here. Same thing. Push my finger underneath it. I'm going to push some of that sac up and away because I really want to try and cut as high as I can. As high as I can. take the scissors and follow through. Swoop. Cut. Gotta get her in. Cut pretty high. There's the vessel. We have one more missing. Where did you go? There it is. Pretty small. Yours is probably bigger than mine. There's some strange small vessels in this dissection. Well, I'm going to follow it up. I'm going to cut, just like I did before. Get my finger out of there. Boom. I'm just going to cut everything off the top. That was my last one. I can see here's my front one I was talking about before. Here it is. Separate that. This is my front one that looked like it had two connected, but it's actually one. I know that because I can do this. My very, very front one right here. Back to the side. So I'm looking for that little thing that was yellow in the picture. That thing. Oops. You're out of view. That thing. That thing. It's right there. I'm looking for that because that blood vessel will come in right behind it. So if I know where this is at, I know the blood vessel is right behind it. It's right there. It's really small. So I'm going to take my probe. Take some of that blood out. And I cut high enough that I actually got the split again. But that's okay. Sometimes it's fun just to go down and explore. But it's all this section right through here. And the last one. There's some fat in there. Sometimes you need to pull the fat out. See all that? It's fat there. Just pushing my finger through, making that gross, gushy sound to get out of the way. So this one's here, and the last one's right here. There's one, there's two, there's three, here's four. You can see here's the other auricle. You can see how this one goes down into that auricle. Four of them. So we call these the great vessels. These four are the great vessels. There's the front. You can see here, first one. Pull apart a little bit. Sticking together a lot today. There we go. So this first one right here, coming up, is the aorta. This one technically sits right in front of it, but they kind of drew that picture so that you can see the blood vessels. This one's the pulmonary trunk, but its name overall is called the pulmonary artery. So I have an artery here, an artery here. One thing I can say all the time in medicine is that arteries always push blood away from the heart. The word always and the word never we can hardly ever say because there's usually an exception to the rule, but in this one, there isn't. Just pulling some fat off. See it? There we go. Arteries will always push blood away from the heart. It doesn't matter if you're looking at the foot. If it's an artery, it's pushing the blood away from the heart. So the blood already came out of the heart, went down through your chest, down past your stomach, down past your intestine, down your leg, and now it's almost to the foot. It's still an artery, so we're looking at an artery because it's pushing away from the heart and into the foot. Right. Those two are arteries. See how one's blue and one's red? So this one's blue because it doesn't have oxygen in it. This one's red because it has plenty of oxygen. But they call this an artery even though it's blue because it's going away from the heart. The last two, we're going to find the auricle right here. I'll probably cut down a little bit more on this one just so we can see the inside of the blood vessel better. So I'm looking at the auricle. Right here is the auricle. The blood vessel coming in behind the auricle is coming from the heart. It's a vein, or from the heart, I'm sorry, from the lungs into the heart. It's a vein. Just gonna cut over it. A little that way I can see better. There we go. These are all connected. Boop, boop. There we go. So that one's connected too. It's jammed up. Okay. So if I flip the heart around and look to the back, you can see all these inputs, right, and outputs. They split off, just like we saw in the lungs, where they split and split and split. So here are a couple branches that are coming together. So even though it's two different holes, they're coming together. They're bringing blood into this auricle. So all I'm doing is pushing the probe in, but I can take the scissors and do this too. So I can slide the scissors into that blood vessel from the heart, and I can slide it right up into the auricle, and I can look at the auricle. If you want, you can open, put one side in, cut, kind of tough, cut. Now you can see that that blood vessel goes right into that auricle. Oops, see it? Here's the inside of the auricle. The hollowed out area under the auricle is called the atria. Let's go to the other auricle. It's over here. Let's find the blood vessel that goes down in that one. Kind of lines up. Looks almost like one thing. So this blood vessel comes down, goes over here into the auricle. Do the same thing. It's a vein because it's bringing blood into the heart. Probably the most famous, one of the most famous veins. It's called the vena cava, the cavernous vein. Big one. I can open that up. Side two. This. If at any time you want to hold something open, that's what the pins are for. You can take a pen, put it in this side. You can take a pen. Peel this back, put it in that side. Take another pen, hold that part back. You don't have to do this. Saying if I really want to explore in here, like you're welcome to do later, open this all up, I can look inside. Now I can see everything in there. So my vena cava goes into this right atrium, is what we call down here. The auricle is a little part that puffs up, so when I'm exercising, I get more blood into my heart. And I can do the same thing with this one over here. I can use pens and open it up and look, explore. So here's the pathway of the blood. Down here, page 20. I'm looking at the heart like this. It's a little bit crooked. Boom. See the tip, the apex. There's kind of a flattened part called the base. Let's sit here. All the blood vessels coming in from the top. I would watch the blood go into this one that I have open right here. There's the vena cava. This comes from the body. It's deoxygenated blood, which means oxygen removed. The body's already pulled the blood out. It's going in here, going to the top chamber right here called the atria. So it's underneath the auricle. Atria. You can see it. Oops. See that kind of cool looking wall right there? Down in here I can see. Right below it, have some blood clots. I'm not going to stick my finger in there for sure because I have pins that are poking in. I never know where the end of the pin is, so I'm not going to do that. I can pull some of those blood clots out. Goes into the atria. From the atria, it goes down into the ventricle, which is the lower part of the heart. So we're going to actually cut. Ready? You're inside. You've cut into the vena cava. You've cut into the auricle. You can see the atria. We're just going to take this We're going to wiggle our scissors down following that pathway. Should go pretty easily deep into the heart. And we're going to cut, cut, cut until it feels like you have to stop. You can see that dark stripe here. That's about where it feels like I have to stop. I'm going to open this up. Look inside. Isn't that kind of cool? The wall there. You see the shape of it. It's kind of like looking at the top of cauliflower, but dyed a different color. Right? I don't need any of these pens. So how many pens do I start with? I started with 6, right? 1, 2, that means I have 4 in here. 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's all my pins. If you had 5, then your goal is to get those 5 back out. But now I feel safe because there's nothing in here that can cut me. Right, I'm opening it up a little bit more. I'm going to take my scissors and scrape out. Look at that big blood clot. Holy grossness. That over there. I don't need it. That thing. Huh. Looks like a blood clot, but it's not moving. And it's not moving for a reason. It's super important. You see, it's not a blood clot. See, it's like a flap. Where my tweezers go. No, they're here. Huh? Warmer. Ah. Oh. Oh, I see. Thank you. Sister Pieta and I are playing Marco Polo or whatever they call that game. She could see the tweezers and I couldn't. So I have my tweezers and I can grab a hold of that flap and actually move it. See it? It's pretty cool. Slipping. See that flap? That flap is called a cusp because when blood goes into the top of the heart, I want to make sure it always goes in the direction I want it to. I don't want it to swish back and forth. So it goes in the top of the heart, and when it's ready to go from the top down to the bottom, it has to go through a valve. These are valves. You may have heard of someone getting their heart valve replaced. It's good because what was happening is that the blood wasn't moving through this valve very well, and that means that they weren't getting blood where it needed to go. So you can actually have another one put in. But the valve, you can see, if this were a circle looking down into it, because it started as a circle, right? We cut it open, and you're looking down into it. When the heart's squeezing, to make sure the blood doesn't go where you don't want it to, the valve will shut. This is one of those little flaps. This is a flap, and that's a flap. Here are your flaps, right? This side has one flap right here. Two more. There's a flap right there, and I think that third one. Pull back. Oh, open. Yep, right in the back, right there. So I've got one flap here, one over here. I kind of pulled down, and the last one's stuck on the wall right there. Can you see it? It's not going to move very far. 1, 2, 3. So when they're open, blood can slide right through. Swoosh. But when they're closed, it can't go backwards. And they're designed so that they're strings, little tiny strings, if you can see them. See that string right there? There's a string here, there's a string here. So that when blood tries to go backwards, whoop, it catches, and the string, see how tight that string got? Hold it so that this doesn't flap around. It's kind of like a bed sheet or a parachute. So if you take a bed sheet and you just flap it up and down, it goes all over the place. But you take that bed sheet and you tie ropes to the corners, and now you've got a parachute, right? It gives it structure. That's what those little strings are for. They're called a chordae tendineae, which means tendinous cords are a firm cord. Right? So we're down in there. There's the atria. There's the valve right there. We call it the tricuspid because it has 1, 2, 3 cusps. Here's the ventricle right below it. This ventricle is kind of tricky. It doesn't look very big, but it actually goes all the way around the heart. If I take my finger and wiggle, holy moly, I swallow my whole finger. It goes all the way around. So we're looking into the right side. I can take my finger, slide up and around. I can take my scissors, closed scissors, follow that. So remember, looking at the right. Take my closed scissors and follow it all the way around. Keep wiggling, keep wiggling, keep wiggling. What's going to happen? I can see something coming out of the top up here. I'm pushing stuff out. See how the scissors are poking right there? I don't want to, oh, I poked through. You see the tip? So what the scissors were doing, they were following over this way, like this, and they were coming out to this blood vessel that has stuff gushing out of it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to cut to that blood vessel. Cut. Ooh, it's tough. Cut. Got a lot of fat on this one. So I cut down the side here. Now I'm cutting at an angle towards that blood vessel. Get back into the ventricle. There we are. Cut, cut, cut. I go into the blood vessel, try and go to meet that. Wiggle this through, cut. Wiggle through a little more, cut. Wiggle through a little more, cut. I met it. So now here's the front of the heart again, anterior part. I can open this. Look at that path. Here's where I'll need a pin. I'm just going to take a pin, pull the blood vessel back, and put it down in the meaty part of the heart. Boop. Another pin, go lower on the blood vessel, pull it back. Oh, I ripped it. Ideally, I pull back and put it on the meaty part of the heart. I know why it's being so difficult, but it's the thing I'm trying to look for that's making it difficult. There we go. Oh, no, poked through. All right, that's not working for me. My heart keeps ripping right there. So I got one pin in to kind of hold the vessel open. Look inside. Here's what I was looking for. So if I follow the blood vessel down, see that? There are more flaps right there. There's a flap. There's another flap right there. I have three of them. These three flaps are that in the picture. Oops. That in the picture. So on just the right side of the heart, I have two valves. I have the one that I went through back here. We call this the tricuspid valve. It has strings attached to it. And I have the one up here they call the semilunar, which means part moons, because these kind of look like partial moons on the sides. It's right there, but there are no cords attached to it. So here's the pathway. Blood goes in the vena cava, like this, goes into that atria right here, goes down into the ventricle, which is down here, right, down here. But it passed through that valve to get into the ventricle. From the ventricle, it squeezes up in an angle, which we just cut up here in an angle, going for this thing called the pulmonary trunk, which is also the pulmonary arteries, right here. That's the right side of the heart. We call this the pulmonary circulation because this pulmonary refers to the lungs. This is the side that's going to push that blue blood, which has no oxygen in it, over to the heart. Remember, it's dark red. It's not actually blue, but people call it that. Right? It goes out, goes to the lungs, picks up oxygen, comes back in. Now it comes back in to the left side. If you find the other atria, there's that blood vessel. Veins always come back. So this is a pulmonary vein because it's coming from the lung, pulmonary. Goes in. I think you already cut this open, but that's fine. We're going to have to do it anyway. There's the atria, which is the top chamber right here. Pulmonary veins, atria, atria. Let's see if you can see the valve. It's pretty dark in there. Oh man, I can see my valve. I don't know if I can get you to see it though. Let me turn on a light and see if I can do that. Okay, hopefully that's not too much light for us. Okay, I fix that. Can't make the light any not as bright, any less bright. Hoping this is gonna work. Down in. Move it over just a little bit more. This is actually the dimmest part of a surgeon's light. You can see how bright the room that they work in is. There you go. Can you see it down there? See the folds? It's hard for me to look at the camera and at the same time, but there's a cusp. Whoops. See it right there? There's a cusp. There's another one right here. And the last one's right there on the top. So blood goes right through that. Shoot. If I wiggle it, I can feel it. I can cut. Do the same thing we did last time. We're going to cut it like that. So we're in the left atria, this area up here. Pushing down. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Feel it slide right in. That means that we stuck this right through here. From the atria to the ventricle. I'm just going to flip my scissors over. I'm going to cut, 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 cut. This one's a little bit thicker. Cut, cut. I use a different pair of scissors today. I like my kindergarten scissors with the tip. That's blunt, so I don't stab into things I shouldn't. There we go. Cut, 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 cut. Cut, cut. And then it feels like I hit a dead end again, where that dark area is at. These dark areas are muscle. Muscle. If I want, I can actually, I hit the end of it and go up the other side and see if I can get close. Oh, yep, I hit that one now. That's it. That's as far as it's going to go. So what I actually hit, this dark thing right here, is this line. It's called a septum. It's a divider. It separates the right side that we looked at from the left side that we're looking at now. Now I can open this up. Look at that. So cool. So I can see the different parts of the heart. I can see here's the blood vessel coming in, which would be the pulmonary veins right there. There are 4 of them in this picture, but they all come together to one. Has to go in. You see, there's a part coming up over here. There's a part coming up over there. So of those 4, see that? There's some coming from that side. There's one coming from here. We cut this other one open, but it was coming in this way. Coming in. And then that one splits over there, but 4 paths coming in. Now we're in the atria, the top part. Here's the auricle on top of the atria. Here we can see the valve. This is a special valve. It's called the bicuspid valve, not tri. It's called the bicuspid valve, which means it has 2 cusps. There's one here, and there's one there. Bicuspid. We also call this the mitral valve, so it's probably the most famous valve. 2. Now we're down in the ventricle. You see the blood would come down this way, go through the valve, go into the ventricle. You see how smooth, and this is kind of a cool thing. On the surface of the heart, it's nice and smooth. We actually called this layer on the outside the epicardium. Epi. And then cardium. Whoops, sorry. Now it's too bright. There we are. Epi means superficial, so on the surface. The next layer, this meaty layer, this real strong, thick layer that I just wrote all over, is called the myo for muscle, myocardium. And then the shiny stuff on the inside through here is the inner layer, so we call it endocardium. So I just wrote those 3 pieces. ENDO is endo, MYO is muscle, and epi is EPI, superficial. Like your epidermis is the superficial layer of your skin. Myo means muscle, so it's the muscle layer of the heart. Endo means within, so it's the inner layer of the heart. So a lot of those terms we just put together. There you go. So see how smooth the endocardium is? It's super shiny, kind of like the outside. But you can see how rough the muscle layer is, the myocardium, because it's like a steak that's been cooked, right? Or a piece of chicken that's been overcooked. Because when we put it in this chemical, it actually cooks it, just not with heat. It uses chemicals to cook it. So now how do you get out of there, right? Blood came in, atria, there's the valve, there's the ventricle, and then it's a dead end. We had to cut through this. So where's it go? It's sneaky. If you look at the picture, it shows it. It shows blood coming in here to the atria. There's the valve, there's the ventricle, but then it shows an arrow going up this way under the artery we cut last time and out. So if we take your scissors or probe, there's the valve. We have to go this way, across, right? And under the valve, there we go. But under the valve, behind everything, and there it is. See the vessel coming out? Probably the most famous blood vessel in the heart. It's called the aorta. If I pull this out, I can look down and in. Spreading this open. Here's where it splits and goes to the left and right sides. Kind of look inside of it. I'm looking in there to see if I can see a valve, because there's one more valve. Remember, there's got to be one right here to keep blood from coming back into the heart. I can kind of see it, but you probably won't. It's the gray. It's gonna be really hard to see for you. So what I'm gonna do is cut more off of this. Boom. I cut a little bit lower. Now can you see it? Yeah. That flap right there is part of the flap. Every time I touch it, it hides it. But that little kind of gray flap right there. There's one there. There's one back here on the wall. There's one down here in the corner. 3 of them. So it looks just like the one in the picture. See if I can cut it a little bit more. I'm going to be very bold here. You don't need to do this. I'm just making it so you can see that cusp. You can explore all you want. I know I have a pen in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pens. That means I have 1 right there. 6. All the pens are out. All right, so there was the blood vessel again. Looking down and inside, cut through the muscle. There they are. See right there? This flap. Ooh, this one's hard to see. That's why you don't have to cut this. This is a very firm muscle. Still may not be able to get to them all. There we go. So down here is the ventricle. It comes up. There's the cusp. There's a cusp right here on the wall. There's the third one right there. 1, 2, 3 of them. So when they close, they look like this. 1, 2, 3. When they open, they're like that, like they look like right now. That's the heart. You can explore all you want. It's kind of cool holding it. If you want later, you can take some of this fat. I saw it. Where did I just see it? There we go. Here I can see part of the blood vessel that goes to the coronary arteries. So this is the main branch coming around. You see it going this way. If I wanted to, I could follow it, or I could put a probe into it. You keep wiggling it, and I can actually follow it and its pathways. So it'll come around here, branch, and then I'll split in 2. I could follow that underneath this fat by cutting it away and dissecting the fat. See where it splits. See part of it come this way, part of it come down. But these are things you can do for fun if your parents want to do it with you. Let's go to the next organ. Kidney. We'll move our lungs up. Put our heart up there. I'm going to move this light because it's really bright and it makes too many blind spots. There we go. Heart, lungs. Gloves when I've had to go flip the light switches. And reach into the bag and get the little thing that looks like a kidney bean. If you don't know what a kidney bean looks like, it looks like a kidney. This squishy thing, not the brain. It's squishy. The brain looks very different. The brain looks like that. You can tell the difference. Okay. Kidney has the long stringy things hanging off of it. Whoop. A little slippery. Bring the picture back over. So when we think of the kidneys, we think of it making tinkle, right? Urine. But it does a lot more, way, way more. The little tiny organ, if you take both of your kidneys, they're 2% of your whole body. So 2/100ths of the whole body. But every time your heart beats, 20% go straight to these kidneys because the kidneys do a lot of things. They clean your blood. They help take acids and bases, so strong chemicals that can hurt you, take it out. Helps control water. If you have too much water in your body, your kidney will help you to urinate out part of it. If you don't have enough water, it holds more water into your body. It helps maintain electrolytes. You may not think about this, and then you probably haven't had chemistry, but electrolytes are like electricity chemicals in your body. So something like Na plus and Cl minus, you might have heard of sodium. Cl minus is chloride. If you put these together, they're actually table salt, part of table salt on your kitchen table. But I look at the positives and minuses and I think of a battery with its positive end and its minus end. Your body uses these things, sodium and chloride and potassium and calcium and all kinds of things that you find that have pluses and negatives over their names. Your body uses these like batteries to create electricity. Your kidney helps get rid of the ones that you don't need. You know, it's like an old battery that they left in a flashlight for too long and it rusted in the inside and ruined the flashlight. Your body has the same problem. If it has too much of any of these, it can actually do a lot of damage inside. So your kidneys get rid of the extra ones. Toxins, like when you take medicine, if you take an antibiotic that's there to help you get better when you're feeling sick, or you take an aspirin when you have a headache or a Tylenol or something like that, those things aren't made to go in your body, but they do good things for us. So the kidneys help get rid of the extra toxins, right? And that's also why we can test someone's, when you go to the doctor and they have you urinate in a cup, they can test what kind of acids and bases you have, what color it is. They can tell how much water was in it. They can tell your electrolytes. They can tell what toxins have been in your body. Blood pressure is controlled by the kidneys. You'd think the heart, but nope. And this big fancy word, erythro, means red blood cell. So erythropoietin is a chemical, a hormone that makes red blood cells. Not in the kidney, but the kidney tells the rest of the body to make blood. That's so weird. But it does all these things. Oh, and also activates vitamin D. So when you go to the sun, your skin makes vitamin D, but it does nothing for you. Then it goes to the liver and gets changed a little bit, but still does nothing. Then it finally goes to the kidney, and the kidney says, okay, we got all the pieces. Let's make vitamin D work. Vitamin D goes to your stomach and small intestine, GI organs, and helps you absorb calcium. It gives you strong bones. So it's crazy how all these parts have to work together to make red blood cells or to clean your blood. It's not just one organ. When we look at it, I keep playing with my kind of massaging it, hoping it'll get more of the kidney shape back. But this is a kidney shape. You can see it's kind of round on the top, kind of round on the bottom, and it has this dip on the middle where these blood vessels go, and this other tube called the ureter. Every organ has a wrapper. You can kind of see the wrapper on the kidney. If you take your scissors, kind of clip it just a little bit. See, I'm in there. Snip. Now I'm completely in there. It's a wrapper. Let go of it, hangs. We call it the renal capsule. Renal for kidney, capsule for something that holds something else. like when you think of capsules in medicine. So now I can see the real kidney right there. Pretty cool. We're going to cut. You don't have to cut it all the way off, but we need to cut at least half of it. There we are. I'm going to peel both halves back. It's still attached, but I'm just going to peel them back. Because I'm looking at it, my kidneys kind of got smashed on one side. So I'm going to cut this side, but I'm only going to cut halfway. I'm going to take this, I'm going to hold it in my hand, this, and I'm going to cut across. Looks like a ball, silly putty or Play-Doh, doesn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it look so it looks more like this in the picture by taking this, cutting half, like if I held a hamburger bun in my hand and I snip, just like that, one snip. I cut halfway right down to where those strings are hanging out. I can open it up and peek in. So cool. I'm going to make one more cut. So I cut it halfway. I'm just going to slide my scissors in where I cut before. I'm going to cut straight up that. So I just took a chunk off. Kind of see the structures here. See that outer part? So we peeled off the capsule. The outer edge where it's kind of rough is called the cortex. Cortex is Latin for bark. Not like bark, 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 like a dog, but bark of a tree. Where do you find the bark of a tree? On the outside, right? So the outside surface here is called the cortex, where it's pink in the picture. The darker parts inside of here are called the medulla. Medulla means middle. And we call these shapes medullary pyramids. Right there, renal pyramids. Sometimes the shapes are hard to see. Kind of make it out. Let's see if I can scrape it. Can you see it here? I'm going to make a line. So it goes up. There's another part that goes up here. So like that shape. They call them pyramids because they're three-dimensional. When you draw a triangle, that, right? It's a triangle. It's three sides. But a pyramid's three-dimensional, so it actually goes back, comes up, right? Same thing over here, back. Not the best pyramid. But then there's a four side back here, right? So it has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, and then a bottom. So a pyramid's a three-dimensional structure. We can just see the triangle shape right here from the flat picture. Down here, see it's kind of hollow and has this different colored structure. See how it's little tubes that come in? All these little tubes right here, you see the yellow in the picture? They're called calyces, and it's just a fancy passageway. But what happens is the blood will come over, go into your kidney, goes up here to the surface, to the cortex, and then goes into little tiny balls like this down in the picture. So this thing's called a glomeruli. It's just a ball, like a ball of yarn with blood filling it. So the ball of yarn has blood all over the place. And that filters and cleans your blood. So it filters the blood coming down. All these tubes that are attached go way down into the pyramids, way down here. And when it's done, this tube is kind of like an assembly line at a garbage dump. So let's say that you're recycling. You're going to dump all your blood, which would be your recycling products, into this thing, this chamber that mixes them all. Then it's going to trickle out and put all the recyclables on this conveyor belt. And it moves along, right? Each section of the conveyor belt pulls out something important. Like, let's say this part pulls out the glass products, like the glass bottles and stuff. Keeps moving along. Next, pulls out the plastics. Keeps moving along. Next one pulls out the cardboard, the heavy paper. Keeps moving along, then pulls out the regular paper. Keeps moving on, pulls out the tin and the metal. Keeps moving on, and now all that's left is stuff that's not really recyclable. So, whoop, takes all this stuff and dumps it into these calyces that we just talked about that dump into this collecting area called the pelvis. Whew, lots of stuff. But it's a long disassembly line. Not like assembly line where you build a car and everybody puts a piece into it. This is just the opposite. It takes all your trash and your blood that might be recyclable, puts it in this pathway and just takes out what it needs and puts it in different places. So it pulls away plastic into this one, cardboard in this one, paper in that one, tin into that one, and then everything that's left is true garbage. That's what goes into your urine. The true garbage goes into this collecting area called the renal pelvis. And the renal pelvis pushes it out into this yellow tube for urine called the ureter, which is over here in yellow too. And that ureter squeezes it. It's not like a straw that you just put water in one end and just drops down the other end. This actually squeezes it like you have toothpaste, grabs one end, it goes and pushes the toothpaste out the other end. This has urine on the top and it grabs it, pushes it all the way down until it drops in your bladder. Your bladder fills up slowly, drip, 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 until you have about the same amount of fluid in it as you would have in a soda can, right? We'll go back for a Pepsi Coke product. When your bladder gets about the size of a soda can, then you go, oh my goodness, I think I gotta find a bathroom. And that's when you let it release through the urethra out of your body. So it's made in the kidneys, drops down the ureter, gets stored in the bladder, and released through the urethra. That's the whole process. Kind of crazy. So let's see if we can find these. Right. There's our wrapper covering. We want to find the blood vessels that go in and out, and we also want to find the ureter. Oh, cha-ching. Quick. Right, so you have some strings hanging off. I'm going to pull the string straight because they kind of get bent on the end. I'm just going to snip them. Snip. Now I can actually see the holes that are inside. There we go. See the little tiny hole? That's the ureter. And you can see there's a lot of muscle around the outside of it because it squeezes the urine down into the bladder. This other one, it's kind of wrinkly. Ooh, how big that thing is. I almost get a pin in there. See if I can. Oh, a lot of ink. Sure I can. I can get the tip in there. So that, whoop, is the renal artery. Like I said, remember, 20% of every heartbeat pushes blood into this. It's crazy amazing. And the last one, you go. Ureter, artery. Follow out, see where the blood goes. Can't find it. That's no good. I'm looking for a vein. The vein carries the blood away, and it's usually stuck right here with the artery. But seeing it on there. What if it was accidentally torn off? Sometimes that happens when the butchers are taking the different parts from the animal. Not so perfect at taking. Oh, yeah, that's what happened. There it is, right there. So they're not so perfect at cutting everything at the same level, is what I was about to say. So sometimes you're missing things. So there's the ureter, right? There's the artery that takes blood away from the heart and into the kidney. And there's the last one. It's the vein. Let's see if we can cut that and open it up too. Snip. There we go. See on the inside? So that's crazy. Look how big the vein is. I can't get the whole probe in the vein. But the artery, holy moly. I could get a couple probes in the artery. Why do you think that is? Well, when you think about what happens with the kidney, a lot goes into the kidney. Not a lot of blood comes back out because a lot of that stuff goes into the ureter and actually goes to the bladder. So the blood vessel coming out of the kidney doesn't need to be as big as the blood vessel going in. So there's the blood vessel going in called the artery. There's the blood vessel coming out called the vein. And then there's the, just lost again. Oh, here we go. There's the ureter. It's kidney. It's kind of a cool organ, even though it's super tiny. Let's get on to the nervous system. So the nervous system, we kind of pulled the brain out earlier. I'll let you dig around for the brain real quick. While you're in there, find the eyeball. I have a lot of tissue over it still. There it is, right there by the eyeball. So your nervous system's pretty amazing. It's like a supercomputer that's alive. So when your brain knows what's going on, it has to have three parts. It has to have an input, just like your computer has an input when you have a mouse, like this mouse pad, or a keyboard, or maybe you have a camera that's taking information and sending it into your computer. Those are all called inputs. We call your nerves that are in your fingers, your receptors, all those parts, we call that the peripheral input. When you touch something, it's just like a keyboard gets a tap. You get little tiny taps on your fingertip to send a signal up a cable, just like this, called a nerve, into the spinal cord or brain, where it's processed, and that's called the central processor. The central processor is like your computer, where it takes the information and tries to understand what the information means. Your brain does a lot of that, but your spinal cord does a lot too. We just don't think about the spinal cord. For instance, if you step on a tack, you're walking along, or broken glass, you're walking along, you step on it, a signal comes from your toe, from a peripheral input. It goes all the way up your leg. The longest one individual cell in your body is actually one of the cells that goes from your toe, big toe, all the way to your heel, up to your knee, up to your hip, and then your spinal cord. One cell that can be almost 3 feet long. Insane. But that one cell will send a signal up to the spinal cord. The spinal cord will decide, what do I do? And it says, well, we're stepping on broken glass. There's probably not enough time to tell the brain to think about it. So let's just go ahead and we're going to move the foot. And it sends a signal back down to move the muscles in the lower leg of your foot. Say, ow, get off that. We always think of the brain thinking of everything, but the brain doesn't even get that signal right away. The brain will eventually get the signal and you go, oh, well, that was dumb. I saw the glass, I didn't think about it, and I didn't move my foot. So now I stepped on broken glass. Other things like sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste, all those can go straight to the brain without even going through the spinal cord. Some of them. We just talked about touch, but like smell. Smell goes in your nose, goes to the center of the brain, goes out to the surface of the brain that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And you think about that smell and you go, was that good or bad? Do I want to take another whiff or do I not? You process the smell, and when you're all done, you think about it and you respond to it. You don't even need your spinal cord involved. But, oh, that was a pleasant thought. That reminds me of grandma, or whatever it reminds you of, right? That peripheral output would be when you moved your leg, or if you get a smile on your face because of the thought of grandma or something like that. The peripheral outputs might be on your computer, the picture on the screen, or if you can get it to move something, like if you have a robot connected to the computer and it makes the robot move, those are all peripheral outputs. So the first thing we're going to look at is the eyeball. Let's talk about some of these senses first. So your eyeball is a big group of receptors. It takes visual or light stimulus from around you, understands it just enough to send a picture to your brain so your brain can understand what to do or think about what to do with it. So if we look at this eyeball is a lot like yours. This one in the picture is exactly like yours because it's a human eyeball. But light will go into the front of the eyeball, right there. This cloudy spot is normally clear while we're alive, and it clouds over after we die. But it's clear, and right in the center is called a pupil. You might be able to see the dark spot in there. All around, and it's right there. All around the outside is an iris. So the colored part of your eye, whether it's blue or green or brown, that's the iris. The iris can squeeze down and make your pupil small, or it can relax and make the pupil big. it determines how big the iris is. So light goes through the front. There's cloudy cornea, is what it's called. It's normally clear. It goes through the pupil, and then it hits this round thing called a lens. And while you're alive, the lens is kind of like a firm gummy bear. If you were to squeeze it, it's clear, light passes through it. But when we die, just like the cornea gets cloudy, the lens will get cloudy too. You can feel how hard this is. The lens gets hard too. And we'll cut it open and look at the lens in a few minutes. Right, so light goes through the lens. The lens bends light, kind of like a pair of glasses or like a telescope or binoculars or whatever you have that bends light, or even a magnifying glass, so that it modifies or changes the image and makes it as clear as possible. So the signal goes through the center of the eye, which is all fluid, and we'll see that in a minute. When you're alive, the eye is really puffy because it's full of water, but when you're not, it loses water and it gets a little more jelly-like. And then finally, the picture hits the back of the eyeball, and that's like a camera called the retina. Whoops. And this is a picture of the retina all along here. So that light goes all the way through, past all these individual cells, past those cells, past those cells, past. Finally, it's the back where we have things called rods and cones. Rods help you see black or white, so light or darkness. And cones help you see color. I think of snow cones in the summertime that are all kinds of colors. But what's crazy is you can only see 3 colors if you didn't know that. You can see red, blue, and green. Those are the only cones you have for those colors. When you see yellow, it's not real. Your brain made it up. When you see orange, your brain made it up. When you see purple, your brain made it up. We do other STEM classes where we experiment with these so you can see it, but right now we're doing the anatomy. So if you ever get a chance to take one of those STEM classes, please do. It's fun. We explain how light and images work. So all the way through this pathway, you're bending light, making it more focused, taking a snapshot with your camera, and then finally you put that signal, just like if you plugged a cord into your camera and went to the computer, that signal goes to your computer, the brain, to understand it. Flip this over. Here's the front of the eye. Kind of line it up. That means right back here, that thing, see it, is the optic nerve. So the opposite side from where light goes in, there's the optic nerve. You can peel it. It's really strong. See how it looks like a cord as I start pulling it apart? All of this stuff is fat. Because if you look at a picture of a skull, where your eye goes is actually pretty big and your eyeball slides into it. Fat helps hold it in place, like filler. Okay. So we're going to cut into it. I have to cut back a little bit because I still have, mine has eyelids and everything attached. Don't see that very often. On the outside, you can see some of these muscles that control the eye. There's a muscle down here, a muscle over here. You see a muscle right here. So there are 6 of them all together. All this yellow stuff, that's fat. See a lot of fat in a sheep. The sheep must be raiding Farmer Brown's freezer and getting ice cream in the middle of the night. So fat. All these pink things are muscles. So I'm going to have to cut back just a little bit. I don't want to cut the muscles if I can avoid it. Just want to get into cornea. So here's a tricky thing. This is like a grape. If you squeeze too hard, what's going to happen? Squish, just like a grape. So when I want to get in here, I just pinch a little. I pinch where I want to cut. This takes a little time. I'm actually going to cut right there on the cornea. Pinch a little bit and snip. Pinch a little bit and snip. Pinch a little and snip. Oh, pinch a little, snip. And the cornea is thicker than you think. Pinch a little and snip. It has to bend light. So it's not like, oh, got it. Did you see what's happened? I pinched and snipped, and one pinch, a little juice came out. So remember, this is full of fluid. Now that I can get the scissors in, see how I can slide the scissors into it? Now I'm going to clamshell it. Remember how we clamshelled the heart? Where we cut along one side and then cut along the other side so we can open it like a clam? That's what we're doing. So I'm going to cut this side straight back. Kind of hard. Cut this side. Now I'm going to flip over and cut the other side. Snip, snip. That was way faster. Snip, snip, whoop. Snip, snip, snip. So I'm all the way across and open. Right? Right, clam. So I can peel it open. I can see if I put my scissors under here, I can see the things that are under the cornea. Here's the pupil right here because I can see really clear the scissors. There's the iris back here because I can't see so clear. If I lift this up, the iris is dark. Everything in here is going to be dark. Just try and clamshell just a little bit further. It's going to get really hard as I get close to the optic nerve because there's so much tissue back here. There, there. All right, open it again. And sometimes this happens, looks like it's going to happen to me. Sometimes the gel, and when we pass, the water leaves our body, starts leaving slowly. When it leaves the eye, it makes the eye, that grape I just referred to, the eye's like a grape. Well, when you take the water out of a grape, what do you have? You have a raisin. So the eye starts looking more like a raisin, and everything in it gets a little bit more thick, just like this. So I'm actually dumping out what was in my eye. Can you see it? It's rolling around like a jelly ball. There we go. Oh, a little further than I wanted it to roll. There we go. So there's all the gel that's in the back. We call that vitreous humor. It's thickened. Here you can see part of the iris still attached here. There you can see the lens. So the lens, if you feel it, well, number one is you'd think it'd be more clear, and it is when you're alive, but it clouds over when we die. It's also very hard now, where it's more stretchy, like a gummy bear, where you can smush it. Firm, but smushy. Normally. So light passes through there, it gets bent, goes through all of this liquid. And then finally, it opens up. The back part's the retina. See it? And if I look at where the optic nerve is, it's right here. And I follow in right there. See how all the wrinkles in the back seem to go to one spot? So there are wrinkles all over here, and they all go to one spot. That's where the optic nerve is, and there are no cones or rods. You can't see there. It's called the blind spot. It's right in the middle of your vision. And when you look at things, there's actually a black nothing right in the middle of your vision. But your brain fills in all the information and says, well, what must be here is this, and it just fills it in. It's another thing. If you Google blind spot test, there's a test that has a plus sign and a 0 on a piece of paper, and you just move the paper further or closer away to your eye, and one of those disappears. It's because it got into your blind spot. It's not just a black hole in your vision. The paper looks like it's all there, but there's no drawing on it anymore. It's pretty cool. And then that shininess on the back, it's called the tapetum lucidum, means light tint. Most animals, besides us, have one, and it's a layer of crystals. Let me see if I can find my tweezers. It's a layer of crystals that bounce light, so they see better in dark environments. Kind of ripped it. I was hoping to pull the whole thing off. Not gonna happen. Pull some off. It's falling apart. So when light comes all the way in, it hits this layer of crystals behind the retina and bounces light back. So these retina cells get light coming in and going back. This is really cool because at nighttime, if you have a dog or a cat and you shine a flashlight at them in a dark room, their eye glows because that light tint bounces light back at you, and it's reflecting the flashlight light. But the color changes to whatever color the tapetum is. So my dog, I have a Bouvier, and her eyes reflect back this reddish orange, like demon-y, evil-looking color, but she's a sweetheart. My friend's dog has a Schnauzer. When you shine light in, it's more of this color, this teal color, kind of like that right there. I have a cat. When you shine a light at it, it turns green. The light comes back. Some cats have yellow, but even different cats have different colors. Even different dogs have different colors. So it's kind of cool how that works. But that's how vision works. It goes in, takes a snapshot, sends it from the optic nerve into the brain, and then the brain interprets it. So grab your brain. Let's follow this. Here's where the eyeball is. I'll give you a second to grab the brain. Okay, so here's the brain. You still have these things attached. This is a lot of the fat from behind the eye. You can see where these pinkish things are the muscles where they were coming off the eye. There is the optic nerve, that little round thing in the middle. So we can kind of peel back around the optic nerve. There it is. If you want, and this is challenging because there's a lot of fat there. If you want, you can peel all the fat off around the optic nerve and follow it all the way through until you get to this cord coming out, which is still optic nerve. You have one on both sides. Oops, this one got cut. There it is coming out. There's where it would be going in to the brain. So if you flip the page in the book, you can actually see this pathway. There's the eye. There are little muscles around it. The optic nerve sends a signal in. So look at the eye first. Coming in, all the way down. Sorry, here's the eye up here. I'm looking at two eye pictures. There's the one with the muscles and controlling muscles. This is just the eye and vision. Optic nerve comes down. See the green? Crisscrosses. This is called the optic chiasm. There's a cross right there. So there's my optic nerve, goes in. There's where the other one would go in. Crisscrosses on the bottom of the brain. See how it comes across? So signals from this side can cross over and go to the opposite side of the brain. Signals from this side can cross over and go to the other side of the brain. How vision works. Everything you see on the left side of you will get to both eyeballs, but that left signal will cross over to the right side of the brain. Or if it's in this eye, it stays on the right side. Everything you see on your left is actually thought about on the right side of your brain. Everything on the right is thought about by the left side of the brain. Most things in the brain work like that. Your right hand is controlled by your left brain. Your left hand controlled by your right brain. Right? So let's explore. You can see there are a lot of different nerves on the bottom. Nerves are bundles of cells called neurons that help the brain think. You can see there are 12 of those pathways across the bottom. You're welcome to explore them later. I'm just going to start cutting into the brain. Right. When you look at your brain, here are the main parts. This is the cerebrum. This is the big thing that we think of as the brain. Back here is the cerebellum. There, cerebellum. This is all cerebrum. And this thing that runs along the bottom is called the brain stem, and it eventually turns into the spinal cord. Those are the three parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brain stem. The whole brain has a wrapper that goes over the surface, and it's called the meninges. Everything has a wrapper, right? Pericardium around the heart, pleural sac around the lungs. We didn't do much intestines, but the intestines have something called the peritoneum around them. Brain has the meninges. If it gets inflamed, we call it meningitis. Remember the itis at the beginning of this whole thing? So this clear layer that's on the brain is the meninges. The part you can see really well that gives it that clouding is called the dura, because it's very durable, and you're going to see that. If you can find a hole in it somewhere, like I found, you can peel it back. It's kind of rough, especially towards the center. And if you're having a hard time peeling it, you can take your scissors, put them under. So open them up, put one side under, and cut. Lift it up. The brain's super soft, so don't stab the brain with the scissors. Cut, cut, cut. I can peel it. So you see the meninges. There will be a scalp, so skin, a periosteum. Peri means perimeter, remember. Osteum is referring to what? Osteo is bone. Yep, so there's a layer on the bone protecting it. There's bone underneath that. Underneath that, there's another bone protecting layer. Then you have the meninges. And the first part of the meninges, right here, is the dura that you can see. There's actually a webbing that's holding it down, so you kind of feel it peel. That's called arachnoid because the spider webbing. Peeling, peeling. Go this way and peel. Oh, pretty tough. It's dura, which means durable. Snip a little bit, snip a little bit. I don't want to cut anything I don't need to, so I'm only cutting the meninges. Peeling back. There we go. Notice it's stopped. It's cerebrum because the cerebellum has its own wrapper, also called meninges. Now I can see the whole cerebrum. Oops. Up here at the front, if I'm looking back at the nerves here, the first one's the olfactory. Do you remember what olfactory meant? Smell. So here's your smell nerve. Smell nerve goes right to those little patches in the nose, just like that. Sends a signal back into the brain. That signal goes into the brain and then comes out here in the temporal lobe. One of the things is smell. And this tan temporal lobe. So down here you can see where you can plug things in. Temporal lobe, right there. Smell. I'll put this down as number one. So number one is the temporal lobe, smell. Taste is also in here. Hearing is underneath the ear. So all through this area on each side, taste, smell, hearing. Go back. I'm going to put my finger down the middle. It's just my finger, not cutting. I can feel that peeling. That's still meninges, but it's not the dura. The dura is peeled off. But if you look really close, there's a thin, smooth layer across the surface called pia. It's the last layer of the meninges, and it actually touches the brain, helps hold everything where it's supposed to be. So I'm just letting my finger kind of peel that back and forth. You can hear it. Ooh, kind of tears. Back and forth, back and forth. Wiggled. Boop. And now I've separated the brain, so left and right sides. There's still a big connector in the bottom, so you can't rip it apart. So something that's fun to know, your left brain, I like to call the school brain. It's for all the things that they make you do in school. Math, reading, writing, logical thinking, or all that kind of stuff, that's schoolwork. The right side of the brain is all about fun, but artsy fun. That's supposed to be an A-R-T-S-Y. Artsy fun, because it's really good at crafts, like painting and coloring and drawing and music and all that kind of stuff. It's good at it, your right side, but it doesn't know languages like you learn in school. It doesn't understand math. It doesn't understand spelling. It doesn't understand any of those things because those are all left side. Your right side is just a fun side of the brain. We divided it. The lobes are what we're looking at here. So we already mentioned the temporal lobe. If you draw a little line or separate in your mind between the red and the blue, everything up here is called frontal. And the frontal is personality. Your personality is the best word to summarize. It's what makes you you. What makes you interesting. It's where you come up with jokes. It's where you plan what you're going to do tomorrow. It's where you plan what you're going to do with retirement. It's where you plan all kinds of stuff, all planning. It helps you think critically. It helps you think logically. But it's also for movement. This red area we call the motor cortex, right there. And that moves you. If I were to do brain surgery on you and cut your skull off here and take an electric probe and touch here, it would make you move parts of your body. So if I touched in here, I'd move your fingers. I touched over here, I make you move your lips. You'd be like, what's going on? You can't control it. You just move like a puppet. That's all part of the frontal. Right here where I had to draw the little line between the red and blue, from this, the blue and the purple, it's called parietal. P-A-R-I-E-T-A-L. Kind of writing sideways. It's weird. But that's the parietal lobe. So we slapped a 2 in there. Let's put down here, number 2. Frontal lobe, we'll put a 3 up there. Motor cortex, 5. Doesn't matter what you put next to them. It's just to help you find them. But the parietal lobe is for sensation, feeling, not like emotional feelings, like physical feeling. Parietal lobe. It's called somato or soma sensation, which means body sensation. It's also important for memories. So when you think of grandma, grandma doesn't exist here. She doesn't exist here or there or there or there. Pieces of her exist all over your brain. So that smell that you think of with grandma, maybe it's her favorite perfume she's been buying for 50 years, whatever. The taste, maybe you think of pumpkin pie because you always think of that. So that's why pumpkin pie reminds you of grandma. Maybe it's the sound of her voice. Maybe it's the shape of her eyebrows, whatever. She's stored in all these places, and any of these things can trigger grandma. So collectively, grandma is here, but just pieces of it from everywhere come together. Cool, kind of crazy process. And the last part back here is called the occipital lobe. So occipital lobe, say number 6. And that's all about vision. Your eyeballs are way up here. Whoop, send the signal all the way through the middle of your brain, and then finally, when that signal goes back to the back of your brain, you can understand what you're looking at. That's the occipital lobe. Puts all the pieces together. So if someone's blind, there might be something wrong with their eye. There might be something wrong with the optic nerve. There might be something wrong with the middle of the brain. This area is called the thalamus. There might be something that's wrong with their actual cortex, which is, remember, cortex means bark of a tree, so it's the surface. Maybe there's something wrong with the cortex of their brain and the occipital lobe. You can't understand. Lots of things can be wrong to cause blindness. Right? Oop. So let's cut it open. See what's on the inside. Right? To cut it open. Oh, I guess I kind of skipped over something. It's right here, the cerebellum. When we cut it open, we're going to cut it, but we're going to stop at the cerebellum. So I think a really good way to do this is to open your scissors nice and wide. Those aren't scissors I was using. These are. I like these round tip ones. Wiggle it open. Put the scissors right down the middle. So they're on the outside over here. See them right there? The other blade's right down the middle as far as I go peeling, and then one quick snip, snip through. Oh, look at that. Everything's cut nice and clean. I can slide my finger back a little bit more. And looky. Get my finger all the way around, all the way to the center. All right. Cool. I'm going to peel. See where that meninges is at? It's right here. Cut, cut, cut. I want to get exposed to that cerebellum. We didn't cut into it. I take some of these snips. I can peel meninges off the cerebellum now. Ooh, it's being tough. Ooh, gross. So did you see that? This is normally not crusty. It looks like my sheep had some brain damage. Crusty here. See how this is a different color? Definitely damage. There we go. That's what was holding me back. So I peeled all the way around. See how it goes all the way down here too? Just gonna take a snip, 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 snip. Still tough. Oh, got it. Took a pop and a snip. Now I can peel this up. There it goes. Nice. And over. Now I can see the cerebellum and everything. My brain, the cerebrum is cut in half. My cerebellum's back here. You can see my structures. I can see the brain stem down there. That's cool. Up to there. Scissors and probe. So now I can look at the inside structures. My right brain, my left brain. Brain stem's back here, so right and left. I'm putting it as if it were my brain. See this white strip along here? It's right there. It's called the corpus callosum. It connects my right brain to my left brain. See how it goes all the way across? The corpus callosum lets the two sides speak. So I can think words, send those words over to the corpus callosum, send them to the right brain, and the right brain can interpret the funness of those words. So, for instance, a doctor studied on this area of the brain, just the left side. When you speak words, it's this part of the brain that speaks the words. When you understand words, it's this part of the brain that understands the words, but only on your left side. So how do you understand what they mean? How do you understand like the emotion behind it? What they found is that the doctor studied this area, but when people had a problem, the same spot on the other side of the brain, the right side, they couldn't understand the emotions to the words. So if I want to speak a funny joke, I use the left side of my brain to use my mouth and speak the words, but the right side over here actually gives it funniness and makes it interesting. So if I tell you a joke like, what's a pirate's favorite letter? Right? That's this part telling it out loud. What's a pirate's favorite letter? That's just the word. And then I answer and I say, yeah, you know, most people think it would be the R, right? But it's actually the C is the pirate's favorite letter. So by putting that enthusiasm in it, that's actually the right side of my brain. It's the fun, creative, artsy, emotional, put some music kind of stuff behind it. So it's interesting how the two sides work together for all that. If someone has damage to this part when they speak to you, it sounds like monotone, kind of like your teachers the whole time when they don't change the way that they talk to you, and it just becomes boring after a while. You don't listen. Blah, blah, blah. So maybe when teachers in school, they damage this part of the brain on purpose. Don't know. Output for words, emotion output for the words. Right. So in this corpus callosum, lets the two sides work together. Down here, this round nubby thing is called the thalamus. And the thalamus takes all of your sensations and throws away the stuff that you don't need. So like I used to live by a railroad track and had no idea until my friends would come over and say, how do you sleep at night? Because I live next to a railroad track. And I'd say, I don't know. The thalamus would take all the sound from the railroad tracks while I was sleeping and goes, you don't worry about that, Shannon. Let's just throw that sound away. So I would sleep easily through it. Right? And there are a lot of vision things that the thalamus does and sounds and stuff like that. Like when you're watching TV and you're really into it and someone starts calling your name, you don't hear them. You can hear them because they're close enough, but you're not paying attention. It's the thalamus saying, whoa, 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 that's not important. That's important. And just listen to the things that you think are important or your thalamus thinks are important. But this is the inside of the brain. There's the thalamus. There's the corpus callosum. There's an empty water area right above them. You can see that. Water. Because water circulates around your brain through these little tubes, like I just showed you. The thalamus will be right here, and there's that water cavern. Between the thalamus, down the brainstem, you can actually see a hole in the spinal cord where that water goes. It goes all the way down the spinal cord and back up. It's called cerebrospinal fluid because it goes from the cerebrum down the spinal cord, and it's a fluid. Not a lot of like super complex stuff when you really think about it. But those are some of the inner structures. This part up here, when you know you're doing something, it's this part. When you do things and you don't know why, it's down here. Like when your gut instinct tells you to do something, you just do it, and someone says, why'd you do that? And you go, I don't know, I just felt like I needed to do it. It's down here telling you the right and the wrong thing to do. Up here is when you think about it and go, should I spit on that, whatever? Probably not. That's up here. If every time that you go by railroad tracks and you spit on the ground, that's in here, and you're like, I don't even realize why I do it anymore. The cerebellum, this part, cut it. So cool looking. I'm going to go right down, as if I'm cutting right down the same straight line. And snip, cut it in half. In fact, probably cut it with the spinal cord too. So if you want to take a second snip, straight up the spinal cord. There they are. That is so cool. Look at the design in there. See the design? It's called the arbor vitae, the tree of life. Because if you look at it sideways, it looks like a tree. There's the trunk, there are the branches, and all these little leaves you can see. If you put a probe in between them, they should kind of flake. There we go. So they flake a little bit. They open up like leaves. There's a branch, and then you can open the leaves. They're called folia, like foliage, because you can flip through them. This whole thing, this whole cerebellum has the same number of neurons as the whole cerebrum on the top. They're just so well organized into those leaves, you can't see them very well. So this is all about balance and coordination. Balance and coordination, like when you're doing gymnastics, or if you're walking, or you're riding a bike, or you're doing anything that requires you to be coordinated. Walking on the sidewalk, talking at the same time, chewing gum, whatever it is, it's that part, cerebellum, right there. So the cerebellum, so I remember experiments. If you watch somebody doing an exercise, the cerebellum actually looks at it and thinks, how could I do that? There was a group of rats that they tested that on. That they showed the rats, gymnastic rats, which seems weird, but I guess they must have been like circus rats or something. But they watched these rats play with things, but they couldn't actually play with things themselves. When those rats died, and they cut the cerebellum open, they found that these rats had more grown cerebellum just by watching other rats do gymnastics. It's weird, because they were learning by watching. The last part is going to be the brain stem, and you can see here's the midbrain, which is that lump right up here that we cut into. There's a little bump. Can you see it? See a little bump right here, right here. Right behind us, the pons. That'd be that guy. And finally, the bump here at the bottom is the medulla oblongata. So you got a bump here for the pons, bump for the medulla oblongata. There's the medulla. All animals have this pathway. We call it the lizard brain because even as something as simple as a snake or a lizard has this. And it does all of your basic life functions like choking, gagging, coughing, sneezing. Controls the speed of your heart, controls your ability to breathe. That's all this last part, the medulla oblongata. If something happened to your brain right here, but everything else was perfectly healthy, it would be really bad for you. It would be hard to stay alive. That's the medulla oblongata. If you want to explore, you can see these things are all in 3 dimensions. So you could peel them out one at a time if you wanted to. See what they look like. We call this the limbic system through here. And it does things like memory, emotions, and motivation. When you want a cookie and you really want it really bad and you're feeling that drive, it's in here. Your emotions, fear, anger, sadness are all in here. Actually, the bad ones are right there. And this thing called the amygdala. Memory. The swirly part that comes up and around is called the hippocampus. Guess what animal it was named after? A seahorse, right? I'm not kidding. So it's supposed to be shaped like a seahorse, but that's where you store memories. That's where you store them, not the storage site. It's the place that your memories go. So when you're doing something new and cool, this part will take that memory of what you're doing and decide if it's important and then store it up in your brain. It actually does the storing, not the location for the storage. So if you broke this part, you can learn something new every single day and you would never remember it. Tomorrow you'd have to learn it over and over again. So that's kind of the lump of everything, right? You are welcome to explore down the brain stem, explore those different parts. You can take the whole brain stem out. You can explore any of these nerves that we call cranial nerves. We call them cranial because they go straight into the brain without using the spinal cord. You can explore the spinal cord. See the hole, that line goes down the center. They call it the central canal. Canal because it's a tube. See it? And that's where that fluid, the CSV, cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. I was thinking ventricle is the place. You can explore the ventricles up here. They're all on the last page. You can take a chunk of the brain, which, you know what, I'll do right now. Just take a little piece off. I'm going to take and snip just the frontal lobe that makes us human. Oops, maybe I'll take a little bit more. We look up at the sky at night and we see the star and we think about stars, and we probably wonder stars are millions of miles away from us. And the stars are like our sun, huge, burning bright. Millions and millions of them out there. And we can lay on the grass and look up and see those stars and think about all that. We can think of maybe Newton or Einstein, people that have talked about outer space physics and how those things work. But a sheep looks up, it lays in the grass at night, looks up and goes, wow, I think there are holes in the ceiling. Because it sees those little light holes and doesn't know what's up there. We've studied it, understand, and that's what makes us different. It's this frontal lobe. Everywhere that you see it like a grayish color, that's where you think. So in your computer, that would be like the hard drives or the processor. It's where you save your memory is and you process that information. All the white parts are actually wiring. So wiring, like the white part here in the middle, the corpus callosum. So these signals from here in the frontal lobe, when I ask you to do something, get processed up here. You think, I don't want to do it because it's the wrong thing to do, or I do want to do it because it's the right thing to do. You send a signal into this white area that goes down the center of the brain, goes across the other side, and it connects emotions to it, remember? That will send a pathway down into the brain stem. So if I'm asking you to ride a bicycle, believe it or not, your brain stem will make your heart beat a little bit faster just thinking about riding it, and your breathing goes up just thinking about riding a bicycle. And then it sends a signal down to control the muscles to go move the bike. There's a lot of cool stuff there. The last organ in here, but just in case we have a little bit of time, and well, we're out of time, but I'll pull it out and just let you explore a little bit. Just a bone. This is from a cow, part of a cow leg. You can see the bone on the outside. It's hard, dense. We call that compact. See how it's kind of smooth? If you wanted to peel, this is called periosteum. We talked about it earlier. This is the wrapper on the bone. See how it peels off? It takes a little time, but it peels. That wrapper holds muscles to the bone, so that when I move a muscle, it pulls the bone with it, right? That's what the wrapper's there for. That's the periosteum. You can see the smooth bone. It's called compact because it's very packed together, compact. Just inside, it looks more like ridges, and I can feel if I scrape right on the inside of the bone, I can feel kind of bumpiness. It's called spongy bone because it's shaped more like a sponge, like this in the picture. You can see it at the end of the bone, right here in the middle. This is probably cut out right around here. You can't see the sponginess so much, but you can feel it. It's rough. The stuff I'm peeling out is called bone marrow. Most of your body will be yellow like this, which is fat. But parts of your body are red. We call it red bone marrow because it makes blood cells. Remember, the kidney tells your body to make blood cells, but the red bone marrow actually makes blood cells. So I'm kind of carving it out a little bit. And then it could actually push through. If I carved all the way down, I could push this out. You can see the bone marrow fills the inside of the bone. It makes red blood cells. Your bones grow your entire life. We think, oh, after we get to be like 18, 19, or 20, we don't grow anymore. We do, we just don't grow taller anymore. Oh yeah, I can feel a lot of the spongy bone there. Got really spongy, so it must be getting really close to the end of the bone. All that's spongy. And I don't know if you can see how porous it is. You might have the same thing. But yeah, your bones grow all your entire life. That's why when you break one, it can actually heal. And bones don't scar, if you didn't know that. Not like the rest of your body, like your skin, that can leave a scar. When bones heal, they will sand themselves down smooth, so that it's nice and smooth, like the outside of the bone. That's really all the time that we have today to go through things. You're welcome to Google look things up, keep playing with everything, but I'm going to show you how to close this all down, wrap it all up, keep yourself safe by not getting it all over and getting your parents get angry at you. Switch my camera. Oop, there we go. Put this one out of the way. I'll roll this back, and this will literally take less than 2 minutes to clean up. So I pile everything in the middle. It's all going. All gone, all gone. Oops, those were all gone. You can hang on to that. And then I find the side that had the seam. So the black bag, remember, had a seam on one side. It's the one I told you to hold on to. Here it is on this side. And luckily, I took that glove off because that's the side you, oops, I said it again backwards. That's the side that we're going to dump everything into. So unluckily, I took that glove off. There's always a fix. You want the ungloved hand to go inside without a seam because this is the side you open like a trash bag. Okay? Trash bag. I can take my dirty hand and touch any of this. I don't want my dirty hand going in there. Only my clean. I can touch this side with the dirty, this side with the clean, like this. I'm going to wrap this over. Get my hand down underneath. I piled everything on my dissection board, remember? And now I'm just pulling. Like this is a giant glove. Hand goes in it. I grab my specimen. I pull it. Hand goes in it. Grab my specimen. Give it a pull. Give it a pull. Give it a pull. Still dirty hand touching the inside. Clean hand touching this outside. Pulling. Things fell off. And I kind of like the bag ate itself, right? And all the content. Now it's all in there. Poof. Take your gloves off. Take your clean hand, go underneath. If this is the first time you're taking a glove off, always pinch the wrist. I'm taking my finger under, feeling it up, dropping it in. Take your apron off, put it in. Take your goggles off, put it in. Hands are clean. If they feel wet, it's good. You sweat inside of your hand or your glove. And then just run. Give it a spin. Throw it away. All done. Make sure you wash your hands. Get everything off your hands. Get up to the wrist because you never know, something could have gone over your wrist. And that's the entire thing. Hopefully we'll see you again for another steam at home. If you haven't done the shark, please be part of our shark group. It's a lot of fun. We send you a shark. We send you all the dissection tools again. We dissect the shark for a couple hours. Take out all of its internal organs. We look at its gills. Compare it to humans, so we do a lot of comparative anatomy. We do other things. We're making some engineering stems that you can send at home. We're doing a physiology part. So come back and see us, even though you're not with us. Let's see us through Zoom. And thanks again for participating and playing. Oh, I forgot. You should have had a bookmark. And on the bottom of the bookmark, it sends you to an app that you can download for your phone, so that you can download like a coloring book that has some virtual reality, augmented reality games. You can color a heart, put the app on your phone or tablet, look through it, and the heart comes up in 3 dimensions. I think there's a brain and stuff in here. I'm not sure which ones you can download online, but there are a bunch of games you can download. And it also gives you links to other STEAM events. So thanks again. I'm glad you all get to play with us, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon. Have a good day, and it's Friday, so have a good weekend too.